The Alpha's Deadly Bride. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Rain Hart. Chapter 1. Bride with a Blade. Ashen wilds reeked of old blood and rotting ash. The wheels of the black carriage crushed bones buried in soot as it rolled through the scarred plain, slow and silent as a funeral procession. Smoke hung low in the air, mingling with the stench of charred flesh and the faint metallic tang of dried blood. Shadows slithered between the skeletal trees, watching, waiting. Inside the carriage, Lysaria Veyne sat straight-backed, her posture as rigid as the blade hidden beneath her sleeve. A white veil fell over her face, delicate lace fluttering like a whisper over bruised lips. Her gown, an immaculate thing of silk and pearl, gleamed obscenely bright against the deathscape outside. She did not weep. She did not tremble. Instead, she whispered the words etched into her memory, as if they were the only truth she still possessed. "Tonight, you will be his last bride." Velmyra's voice echoed like a prayer and a curse both. The high priestess had spoken those words with fire in her eyes and blood on her hands, pressing the blade into Lysaria's palm beneath the sanctum's altar. "And in his bed, you will end him." She remembered the temple's cold stone floors. The way the other girls had cried when the blade marked their palms. The drills that followed, hours upon hours of repetition until pain dulled and precision remained. How many throats had she slit in the dark? How many lungs collapsed before she heard a scream? None of that training warmed her now. None of it braced her for what lay ahead. Obsidian Keep rose like a wound in the earth, jagged and black and alive with firelight. Dug into the mountain's heart, it bore no banners, no welcome. Only towers clawing at the sky and a gate wide enough to swallow war machines. Wolves had built this place. And wolves, she had been told, did not forget. Her breath ghosted against the carriage window as she leaned closer. There were shapes along the ridge, warriors, tall and still as trees, watching her arrival from the cliffs above. Their eyes glinted gold through the mist. Not one of them moved. The carriage jolted to a stop. A knock at the door. Then silence. She exhaled, long and quiet, and reached beneath her sleeve. Her fingers found the thin dagger strapped to her forearm. Familiar. Cold. Hers. "Don't hesitate," Velmyra had warned. "The bond makes monsters kind. But this one, it only feeds him." Lysaria stepped out. Snow had not yet reached this cursed stretch of land, but the air was cold enough to bite. Her boots sank into the ash. She looked up at the obsidian gate. Its surface shimmered faintly, like breathing stone. Two wolf heads, sculpted from black steel, flanked the entrance. Their jaws parted in silent snarls. The knight who had driven the carriage lowered his head and turned back without a word. She was alone. Then came the sound. The groan of ancient chains. The grinding of gears behind the wall. Slowly, the gate began to open, not like a door, but like a mouth. A wide, black yawn of shadow and smoke. From within, warm light spilled, flickering torch glow that illuminated the silhouette of a man. Tall. Still. Unsmiling. His presence poured forward before he did, like heat off iron. She couldn't yet see his face, but something in her blood pulled tight. Not fear. Not recognition. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind. "Welcome," the man said, voice deep and cold as winter stone. "My bride." His words struck like a knife against her ribs. Lysaria's fingers slid beneath her sleeve once more, brushing the blade. Her lips didn't move, but her mind whispered back, "Not yet, monster." She stepped forward. Not with the steps of a trembling offering, but a measured pace, like a weapon being drawn. The gate yawned wider. And the mountains swallowed her whole. Chapter 2. The Wolf Who Watches. The hall of Obsidian Keep was carved into the mountain's ribcage, a cathedral of jagged stone and shadow. Bone-white columns clawed upward to a ceiling lost in gloom, and from the cracks in the obsidian walls, pale smoke coiled like breath from some slumbering beast. Lysaria stepped through the towering doors, each footfall muffled by the furred pelts layered beneath her. The scent of blooded earth and ancient ash clung to every surface. She wore white, a bridal gown spun of silk and silence. Its long sleeves shimmered with needle-fine embroidery, each thread whispering a virgin sacrifice. But beneath the fabric, at the hollow of her wrist, the blade slept, thin as a whisper, sharper than betrayal. At the far end of the hall, the throne waited. Malric Thorne did not rise. He lounged against the backrest carved of fused wolf skulls and blackened iron, a single elbow draped over the arm like he ruled not merely the keep but the slow turning of the world. His hair was dark gold, tousled like the mane of a lion that had not bothered to groom after a kill. His eyes, those infamous golden irises, gleamed with the slow, appraising heat of a predator who had already chosen when and where to bite. The room was filled with silence, yet it pulsed. Behind every pillar, every carved maw in the stone, wolves waited. Not as men. Not yet. Their forms blurred in the low torchlight, shadows with teeth, unmoving save for the flick of an ear or the glint of a stare. Lysaria did not bow. The doors thudded shut behind her, sealing her into the cavernous space like prey herded into a pit. She walked forward. Each step lengthened her shadow across the pelts. She did not look down, though she felt the eyes, his most of all, drag over the length of her body, over the exposed collarbone, the proud lift of her chin, the slight swell of her hips beneath the tight cinch of the gown. It was a look that could have been mistaken for lust, but wasn't. No, this was something colder. Something that did not desire so much as dissect. When she stopped at the base of the steps leading to his throne, her voice was as soft and bright as the veil fluttering behind her. "Your Majesty." A beat of silence. Then the voice came, low and precise. "You are smaller than I expected." She lifted her gaze to meet his. "And you're exactly as I was warned." A flicker passed through his eyes, not amusement but curiosity. He rose slowly, one hand gripping the arm of his throne. He descended the stairs like a storm descending from the mountains, calm, cold, inevitable. She did not retreat. "You don't smell afraid," he said, now close enough that she could see the fine scar running from his throat to the curve of his shoulder, half hidden by the open collar of his tunic. His breath was warm, scented faintly of pine and steel. "Perhaps I lost that scent on the road," she replied. "Unlikely. Wolves smell fear beneath perfume, beneath lies, beneath hope." Her smile was thin. "Then perhaps I have none of those things." A low growl answered her. Not from Malric. From the shadows to her right. A figure stepped forward. Slimmer than the other wolves, more controlled. The sound of his boots against stone was almost polite. His blade was not. Everic Oren's sword was not fully drawn, but it was no longer sheathed either. A warning by posture alone. He stopped behind her and slightly to the left, enough to flank, enough to strike if she so much as twitched wrong. Lysaria turned her head, just slightly. "Does your second always snarl before introductions?" Malric didn't look away from her. "Everic is not prone to trust. He serves with teeth bared. And yet I am meant to sleep beneath your roof." "Not sleep," Malric said. "Mate." That word sent a ripple down the hall. Not from the wolves, no. From the building itself. The stone groaned like something remembering pain. Lysaria blinked slowly once. "You mistake me for someone pure." "I don't care what you are," he said, stepping past her now, circling, scenting the air. "So long as you endure." She didn't move, not even as he drew close enough that his hand brushed the veil trailing from her hair. "It's tradition," he murmured, lifting the sheer fabric between his fingers. "To shroud the bride before the marking. I was told wolves are not bound by human traditions. We are not." His tone turned to ice. "But we remember them. Especially the ones that end in blood." Something deep within her stirred. A flicker of the dream, Velmyra's voice under a blood-drenched moon. "He will mark you, and he will regret it. That is how the curse begins again." Lysaria turned, her eyes never leaving Malric's as he moved to the dais once more. And what happens after the mark? His smile could have carved mountains. You survive. He sat again, lounging like a man who had never lost a war. Tell me, Lysaria Veyne, he said, voice echoing slightly now in the vaulted hall. Why did you come? She lowered her gaze. Just a fraction. Just enough to seem humble. Because you are the king. And you obey kings? When the gods send me to. Which gods? She let the pause stretch. The ones who love wolves. Everic made a soft noise behind her. Malric raised one finger. The second in command stopped. I see, the king said. Then they have sent me a clever little bride. One who knows how to smile while planning to stab. She said nothing. He leaned forward. Will you run? No. Will you bite? If bitten first. He chuckled. It was a dark, amused sound that echoed far too long. Tonight, he said, rising again, the golden light catching the edges of his teeth, you will receive my mark. A breath. A heartbeat. Lysaria tilted her head, just enough to conceal the shiver that slid down her spine. As you command, your majesty. She curtsied then, precisely, with just enough submission to hide the curl of fingers around the hilt beneath her sleeve. Malric stepped forward once more, stopping at the edge of the stair just above her. He looked down, voice like smoke and iron. I'll be watching to see how long your calm lasts. Then he turned. Cloak sweeping behind him, he vanished down the side passage that led to the inner chambers. The sound of his boots faded into silence. Everic lingered. He stepped closer, closer than was polite, than was wise, and studied her face. His stare was the blade, not the king's. You don't smell like fear, he said at last. But you don't smell like loyalty either. She looked at him without blinking. Do you know what betrayal smells like? He didn't answer. Instead, he slid the tip of his sword back into its sheath with a soft click. His voice was very quiet. I will, if you bring it into this hall. Then he was gone. The doors opened. The guards who waited outside did not speak. She stepped through them into the corridor beyond. The walls seemed to shift with her, breathing as though the keep itself exhaled. Far behind, the throne room remained. And in the dark above it, something howled once, long and low and full of ancient hunger. Lysaria walked onward, her fingers brushing the blade hidden in her sleeve. She would need more than sharp steel. She would need time. And tonight, time would bleed. Chapter 3: A Bite in Velvet Chains. The ritual chamber of obsidian keep breathed like a beast in slumber. Bone lanterns swayed from the vaulted ceiling, their flickering glow casting elongated shadows against walls sculpted from volcanic rock and something far older. Velvet draperies billowed like sighs held in the lungs of the ancient keep, though no wind stirred. Beneath the looming arch of the bone altar, Lysaria Veyne stood encircled by the highborn of the Thorne blood pack, her breath slow, her gaze unfaltering. She was dressed in silver silk, the color of new ice, cinched at her waist with iron clasps molded like coiled wolves. Her bare shoulders shivered under the scrutiny of dozens of eyes, soldiers, elders, whispering courtiers, but it was the golden stare on the throne that rooted her in place. Malric Thorne, Wolf King of the Black Realms, watched her without blinking. He reclined like a statue cast in shadow and fury, the crown of thorns coiled into his dark hair like a warning. His golden eyes were rimmed in soot, as though sleep had long abandoned him, and his jaw clenched with the restraint of one who could tear throats without rising from his seat. She lowered her eyes just long enough to veil her thoughts. The high priestess stepped forward, her face hidden beneath veils of moth-wing gauze. She bore in her hands a bowl of dark resin, steaming in curls that smelled of burnt fur and crushed lavender. Bring forth the marked, she intoned. A stir in the crowd, then the shuffle of boots. Lysaria stepped toward the altar. Chains of silver and velvet, ritualistic, ornamental, but no less binding, were brought by 2 acolytes. They circled her wrists and ankles, looped around her waist. Her fingers twitched. Within the slit of her sleeve, the needle lay hidden, soaked in dark root poison, nestled beside the venom capsule crushed between her molars. She had trained years for this. She had memorized every nerve in the wolf's throat, every tendon that could collapse a king. Malric descended the steps like dusk incarnate, the air seeming to still with each movement. His black coat flowed behind him, etched with silver threads in the shape of claw marks. The floor creaked under his boots, stone worn thin by generations of oath-bound warriors. "You kneel," the priestess whispered to Lysaria. "I kneel for no beast," she replied softly. Then she dipped her head and let her knees touch the obsidian floor, smooth and cold like a blade. Malric came to stand before her. "You wear your fear like perfume," he said, his voice a slow thunder. She looked up. "And you wear your crown like a shackle." A pause. Something flickered in his gaze. Then he tilted her chin up with 2 fingers, his touch careful but commanding. She felt her pulse slam against her ribs. "You'll receive my mark," he murmured. She nodded. "And if I refuse?" she asked, the corner of her lips tilting in mockery. "Then you die." But slower. Silence pressed in. Even the wolves above the vaults fell quiet. The priestess began the chant. Malric's hand slid beneath her hair, fingers pressing against the nape of her neck. The sacred rite required flesh to flesh. A bite. A mingling of blood, of bond, of ancient curse. She inhaled. Now. Her tongue pressed the capsule between her teeth. It burst. Malric leaned in. Her fangs, dosed with the venom of the bone orchid, sank into his shoulder at the same moment his teeth tore through the skin above her collarbone. Pain flared. So did something else. A scream tore from her throat, unbidden. Fire, not from the bite, not from the poison, scalded through her blood. He wrenched back, staggering. Blood leaked down his arm. His pupils expanded until only a sliver of gold remained. Then he collapsed to one knee. The altar shuddered. Gasps rang out, and one of the elders stepped forward, only to be thrown back by an invisible force. From the ceiling, a long, low howl cascaded, echoed by a dozen more. Wolves clawed at the stone, trapped between form and fury. Lysaria tried to rise, but her body betrayed her. The venom had never been meant for her. Yet her own blood boiled. Malric coughed violently, crimson spilling from his lips. And yet, he looked up, expression half dazed, half something else. "You," he rasped. "It was you, after all." She blinked. Her vision blurred. Shadows curved at the edge of her sight. "What are you saying?" Before he could speak again, the hallucinations began. The bone altar rippled. The stone beneath her hands turned soft, like skin. A scent, lavender and scorched pine, filled her lungs. She saw fire, not of the room, but of memory. A girl stood in snow, holding a dying wolf in her arms. The wolf's eyes were gold. She screamed. The illusion snapped. Lysaria was on her back. Guards had circled the altar, but none dared approach. Malric pushed himself upright, staggering toward her, blood soaking his shirt. "Velmyra," he whispered. "You came back, not as a ghost, but as vengeance." Who is Velmyra?" she managed to say. He didn't answer. Just looked at her as if her skin were wearing someone else's name. The priestess had fallen silent. The wolves had retreated into shadows. Only the 2 of them remained under the bone light, blood and breath mingling in ruinous silence. Malric's fingers brushed her face. He should have struck her down. But he didn't. "You carry the mark," he said, as though it doomed them both. Then he passed out. And Lysaria, bound in velvet chains, looked at the broken king beside her and wondered if she had just cursed herself with the one thing she had sworn to destroy. Chapter 4. The Memory That Isn't Hers. Lysaria dreamed of fire. Not the flickering, fickle kind of candles, nor the cleansing blaze of witches' flames, but a seething inferno that devoured everything in its path. Smoke rose in thick veils, clinging to the scorched bones of a broken palace. Stone cracked beneath heat too ancient to be mortal. And at the heart of it all, a boy stood. No older than 13, the young prince bore a crown of ash, its silver half melted into his dark hair. His eyes were wild, not with fear, but with fury and a desperate kind of grief. Around him, figures cried out in pain, their limbs twisted in unnatural angles, their howls not human. Some shifted in and out of wolf form as though torn between instincts, others clawed at their own skin, bleeding shadows. They looked to the boy. He stood between them and the flames. "You cannot have them," he shouted into the roaring blaze. "Not again." The fire answered in silence. But the heat pressed closer, hungry. The boy's shoulders shook, but he didn't move. He held the line with nothing but will. Not magic. Not claws. Just resolve. Lysaria felt it like a blade through her chest, that impossible, aching weight of carrying too many lives alone. Of being born a shield when all you wanted was warmth. A name brushed her lips, but it wasn't hers. Velmyra? No. Not her voice. Not her pain. Whose? Lysaria. The voice came not from the boy, not from the fire, but from behind her in the dream. Velmyra's presence bloomed like thorns in the air, sharp and silken. She stepped forward from the edge of the vision, clothed in darkness, her silver eyes glowing with cruel serenity. "You're drifting," Velmyra said. "Do you understand now why he must die?" Lysaria tried to speak, but her voice was caught behind her ribs. "He is the source," Velmyra whispered, drawing close. "That cursed blood. That broken will. He is the rot at the root of the throne. Finish it, Lysaria. That was your purpose." But Lysaria's voice cracked into being, hoarse with confusion. "I saw he was protecting them. He wasn't. His protection is a lie. His power is the chain." Velmyra's hand closed around her wrist, cool and controlling. "You were chosen for clarity, not compassion. Feel what you must, but act as you were made to. Or was that kiss of his enough to sway you?" The dream shimmered violently. Blood welled again behind her teeth, phantom pain rippling down her jaw. Velmyra leaned close, her breath cold. "Remember, you were made to end him." The dream shattered like obsidian. Lysaria awoke with a gasp that lodged halfway down her throat. Her limbs felt heavier than they should, every muscle dragged taut as if she'd been pulled from deep water. The ceiling above her was a vast canopy of dark velvet embroidered with silver thread, the air tinged with dried rose and ancient smoke. This wasn't her room. She shifted, her fingers brushing silk sheets, and her heart dropped into silence. A pale window let in the barest silver of moonlight. A silhouette sat before it, motionless, hands steepled, gaze lost in the beyond. Malric. He hadn't turned when she stirred. Hadn't spoken. But he knew. She tried to sit up, but the pain bloomed instantly in her ribs. Her body was wrung out, scorched inside by something not fully physical. Her mouth tasted of blood and ash. He finally spoke. "You bit me." His voice was as calm as still water, but something ancient stirred beneath it. Lysaria's lips parted, but the truth was a twisted knot in her throat. Malric rose slowly from his seat and turned. His silver shirt, unbuttoned at the throat, revealed dark bruises curling beneath his collarbone, just above where her teeth had met his skin. She remembered the moment too vividly, the shock of his blood, the way his body had stiffened under hers, the choking silence before the chaos. "And yet, you bit me," he said again, walking toward her with slow precision, "but didn't kill me." "Why?" She couldn't answer. Not because she didn't want to lie, but because she didn't know anymore. He stopped at the edge of the bed, his eyes raking over her face as if searching for something she didn't even understand herself. "The poison should have worked," he murmured. "I know the symptoms. You wanted me dead." But something shifted. He reached for the collar of his shirt and tugged it down, exposing the bite. The skin around it was still raw, but beneath the surface, black veins writhed faintly, as if resisting decay or fusing anew. I felt you, he whispered. Lysaria's heart stuttered. I felt you, he said again, softer now as though tasting the words. Not just your body. Your grief. Your rage. Your doubt. She shook her head, voice rasping. It wasn't me. He raised a brow. Wasn't it? The door creaked open. Everick stepped in, his presence like an executioner's shadow, unmoving, unflinching. His eyes scanned Lysaria, then flicked to Malric. You should not be up, Everick said flatly. Malric didn't respond to him. His gaze was locked on her. You dreamed, he said. Didn't you? She didn't answer. He knelt by the bed, so close she could see the flecks of silver in his irises, like stormlight caught in ice. I saw something too, Lysaria, he whispered. When you bit me. For the first time in years, the silence cracked. Something moved in the dark. Lysaria's skin crawled. Her fingers curled into the sheets. I don't care if you tried to kill me, Malric said, almost kindly. I care about what's coming. And I think you've seen it too. She shook her head again, but this time more slowly. I don't know what's real. He leaned in, and his breath brushed her ear. Your hand is stained with my blood, he murmured, yet you let me live. She shivered. And that, he continued, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes, tells me there's something left in you worth listening to. Behind him, Everick's jaw tensed. Lysaria's thoughts churned, fractured between dream and waking, truth and illusion. Velmyra's voice still rang like iron in her skull. He is the source. He must be broken. But that boy in the flames, he wasn't the villain. He was the only one who hadn't run. And Malric, now, wasn't chaining her. He was watching her like she was the one who held the blade. Why don't you kill me? She whispered before she could stop herself. Malric straightened slowly. Because you're not done deciding who you are, he said. And then he left the room without another word. Everick lingered for a beat, his eyes unreadable, and then followed, leaving Lysaria alone in the dark with only the echo of her dream and the burning throb of something deeper, something awakening. Chapter 5: The Alpha in Chains. The chamber reeked of scorched stone and incense. Flickering braziers lined the walls, casting golden light against black marble and revealing the gathered council, aged wolves in ceremonial garb, faces like carved obsidian, sharp with suspicion. Lysaria stood in the center, flanked by two silent guards. Her wrists were bare this time, though she could still feel the phantom weight of shackles. She kept her head high, chin tilted just so, even as her palms itched for the cold steel of her blade. He should have let her bleed out, murmured one of the elders to another, voice a low growl beneath layers of protocol. She raised a blade to the Alpha. That alone should be death. Unless she had a reason sanctioned by the gods. The click of a boot silenced the room. Malric entered without ceremony, without guards, without sound. He moved like the night itself, controlled and deliberate, his pale eyes unreadable. He walked past Lysaria without so much as a glance, took his seat at the head of the obsidian table, and crossed one leg over the other with the same composure one might use while admiring a storm through a window. You called for this meeting, he said, voice smooth as frost. Speak. The oldest elder, with a mane of silver like wind-bleached straw, stood. My lord, we question the presence of this human in the heart of our keep. She has spilled blood within sacred walls. We wonder if the blood spilled is yours. A pause. Then the faintest tilt of Malric's head. And if it is? A murmur surged through the room like restless wolves beneath snow. She must be punished, snapped another, younger voice. We cannot let a would-be assassin remain under your protection. Who said she is under my protection? Malric's tone didn't rise, but the force behind it cracked like ice underfoot. She is under my observation. If any here wishes to question my judgment, speak now. And do so knowing that I will answer in kind. No one moved. Lysaria didn't blink. She studied him through her lashes, remembering the dream, the boy in firelight, his fists clenched as flames licked at his heels, his breath ragged but unbroken. He had not run. And now, even surrounded by those who claimed to serve him, he was still alone. Malric rose. "You've had your audience." Dismissed. The elders bowed, murmuring obeisances. One lingered behind, muttering something about ancient rites and omens, but Malric had already turned, his cloak whispering behind him. "Come," he said without looking. Lysaria followed. They walked in silence through long halls carved from volcanic stone, the windows narrow and arched like scars. Guards stepped aside at his passing. None looked at her. When they emerged into a sun-washed corridor, she blinked. The stone underfoot was lighter here, gray-veined with silver and warm with filtered light. A thin door waited at the end, unmarked. He opened it and stepped aside for her to enter first. She did so warily. The scent hit her first, wild herbs and cold earth. Then the light, soft, golden, impossibly gentle for a citadel carved into the spine of a mountain. The room bloomed with strange flora, twisted silver stalks, flowers that opened like mouths and closed when touched by shadow. The air shimmered with dampness, a perpetual dew. It was quiet, unnaturally so, as if the rest of the keep had ceased to exist. Lysaria stepped deeper in, breath-catching. It felt like memory, like something precious stolen from time. Malric moved behind her, stopping beside a vine-entwined arch. "I named it the Sun Garden," he said, "even though no real sun ever touches it." She turned to look at him. "You grew these. They survived. I just didn't stop them." He moved past her, trailing fingers along a tall gray stalk with petals like bone. The wolves who built this keep did so, believing that strength meant silence, that the world outside was weakness. I suppose I used to agree. His gaze slid to her. Then I met someone who broke the silence by nearly ending my life. Lysaria didn't speak. He crouched by a pale blue bloom, cupping it without plucking. "I wonder, Lysaria, when you raised the knife, were you certain you wanted me dead?" She stiffened. He didn't press her. "This garden exists because someone once tried to burn it down. And failed." She looked away. The soft rustle of vines brushing her shoulder made her skin crawl, not from fear, but from some unbearable sense of gentleness. "I didn't think you spared lives," she said. "I don't." He stood. "But there was something in your eyes. Not mercy. Not loyalty. Something between." Her fingers curled at her sides. The truth was, she had not known what she wanted when the blade touched his throat. Only that it felt wrong to press further. "I've killed for less," he added. "Then why not me?" He studied her for a moment too long. "Perhaps because when I looked at you, I didn't see death. I saw chains." Her mouth went dry. Before she could answer, a shadow moved across the door. Everic. He stepped inside like a wraith, not bowing, not speaking. His gaze was fixed on her, sharp and unreadable. "She shouldn't be here," he said. "She is," Malric replied without turning. "And she will remain. She doesn't belong in this place." Everic's voice was cool, but there was a current of heat beneath it. "She carries too many questions and too little truth." Lysaria's heart beat faster. Not from guilt, but from the chilling sensation of being seen. "She is unbound," Everic continued. "And unmarked. You let her near the heart of the keep. Do you think the others won't see that?" Malric turned to him slowly. "You speak out of place." Everic's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. His hand fell to his side, where a dagger was sheathed, not in threat, but like a reminder. Lysaria couldn't breathe. "Go," Malric said. "I will deal with your discontent later." Everic left without another word, his cloak vanishing into shadow. Malric exhaled slowly, then glanced at Lysaria. "He doesn't trust you. Do you?" He said nothing. And that, somehow, was worse. They stood in the hush of the garden, two predators too wounded to strike, too uncertain to retreat. "I was told you're the source of the curse," she said quietly. His eyes flicked to her. "And what do you believe?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But if you are, you hide it well." He laughed, soft, bitter. "The truth is always hidden best in plain sight." Then he stepped past her, leaving the garden as silently as he'd entered. She stood alone, surrounded by gray flowers that whispered against the air, and felt, for the first time, not the clarity of a mission, but the ache of unraveling. Chapter 6: Shadows Under the Moon. The snow against the high window glowed silver, painting frost light across the black stone floor. Lysaria stirred beneath the thin velvet sheets, her breath a slow mist in the cold air of the obsidian keep. Her hand twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. The dream came swiftly, sharp, clear, like a blade drawn too close to skin. She stood in a barren field, the earth cracked and gasping beneath a red moon. The sky trembled with low howls, not wind, not wolf, something older. Across from her stood Velmyra, wreathed in silence, her crimson eyes glowing beneath the hood of her robe. "You waste time." The voice echoed from every direction. Lysaria tried to speak, but no sound came from her throat. Her lips parted around smoke. Velmyra stepped closer, the hem of her robe dragging ash. "The blood moon rises soon. Before the next mark is made, he must die. No more excuses. You know what happens if you fail." Behind her, fire-consumed silhouettes, wolves screaming, hands reaching. Lysaria opened her mouth to protest. She awoke with a gasp. The cold met her instantly, stinging her skin like punishment. Her heart pounded as if it still beat beneath Velmyra's shadow. She sat up slowly, brushing damp hair from her forehead, reaching for the dagger beneath her pillow. But her hand touched something else. She froze. It was cold. Metal. Smooth. Her fingers curled around the unfamiliar shape and pulled it out. A dagger, black as obsidian, smaller than the ones she carried. Its edge shimmered with faint silver runes, temple markings. Silent oaths burned into steel. She stared at it, heart racing. Someone had been here. Someone who knew. The cold pushed deeper into her bones as she slipped from the bed, dressed quickly, and left her chambers, the dagger concealed in her sleeve. Her footsteps were silent against the long corridor stone, but the silence was too clean, emptied of echoes, as though the keep itself was holding its breath. She didn't make it far before she saw him. Everic stood at the corner where moonlight poured through the arch, leaning against the pillar as though he'd been waiting. His arms crossed, but his eyes were alert. Always watching. "You're restless tonight," he said. She didn't answer. He studied her. "Your eyes, they look too certain. It's dangerous." Lysaria tilted her head. To whom? To everyone. Their silence hung between them like a taut bowstring. Everic pushed off the wall, stepping closer until only a sliver of air separated them. She could smell cold steel and cedar bark. "Don't look at him like that," he said quietly. "He's not yours to understand. I never claimed I did. But you want to. That's the danger." He brushed past her and disappeared into the dark hall without another word. Lysaria stood still for a long moment before the soft clack of boots on stone interrupted her thoughts. She turned. A page stood there, trembling in the cold. "His Majesty summons you." She followed without hesitation. The high tower spiraled above the rest of the keep like a black fong piercing the sky. No guards, no servants. Only snow and silence. At the top, wind howled through the narrow balcony, whipping black hair across Malric's face as he stood with his back to her, cloak flaring like wings. Lysaria approached slowly. He didn't speak. Below them, the forest stretched in dark coils, broken only by white clearings and the silver edge of the frozen lake. The moon cast long shadows, and above, clouds skittered like restless spirits. "Do you know why this tower was built?" His voice cut the quiet like a blade through silk. She stayed silent. "For watching," he said. "Not stars, not birds. People." He turned to her. His eyes were softer than she'd ever seen them. "I used to come here as a boy. Hide in that corner. I saw the council burn traitors in the square. My cousin, Gavrin, he wasn't older than you. They said he stole grain. But I saw them. I saw the priest planted in his room. His voice didn't tremble. That made it worse. I begged them not to burn him. Said I'd take his place. But wolves don't barter. Lysaria couldn't breathe. Do you know what sunlight does to us? He asked, stepping into the moonlight. No, she whispered. He touched the edge of his cloak. It doesn't just kill. It tears. Like fire inside your blood. We can't scream. The sound burns out first. Lysaria's hand gripped the dagger in her sleeve. He met her eyes then, and something passed between them, cold and tender and terrible. I still see it. The way he looked at me. Not angry. Just confused. Like he didn't understand why I hadn't saved him. A silence settled between them like snow. Then he smiled faintly. But that's a memory for another night. I wanted to show you something else. She followed him down a side stair tucked into the tower wall. It led through twisting passages until the scent changed. Earth. Sap. Something green. They stepped into a walled courtyard bathed in moonlight. At first glance it looked dead, ashen leaves, pale vines, but then Lysaria saw it. The flowers. Dozens of them. Gray and silver, blooming wide despite the frost. They glowed faintly, like embers under ash. The whole garden shimmered with breathless life. He didn't speak. Just watched her. You planted these, she asked, her voice cracking. Every one. Why? Malric knelt beside a low blossom, brushing frost from its petals. Even in darkness, someone should remember that beauty can still grow. She couldn't look away. The weight of the dagger pressed heavy against her skin, but her grip didn't tighten. I don't understand you, she whispered. Good, he said without looking up. That means I'm still dangerous. Something in her chest twisted. He rose and stood beside her again, too close, too still. I don't need your understanding, Lysaria. I only need your honesty. If you ever raise that blade at me, don't pretend it was for the greater good. Don't lie to yourself. She didn't respond. Her mouth was dry. Will you walk back alone? He asked. She nodded. He stepped away without another word and disappeared into the shadows. She returned to her chamber numb, steps slow. The moon had risen higher, pale light cutting across the floor like a scar. She moved to the bed, sat down. The dagger was still in her sleeve. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out and laid it on her lap. Valmyra's voice rang in her mind, underscore before the next mark is made, underscore. She looked up. The moon stared back. And in her chest, two truths coiled like serpents, fighting for the same heart. Chapter 7, Wolfire Kiss. The altar rose from the earth like the spine of a beast long buried, white bones carved into sigils older than language. Snow spiraled around its jagged edges, as if the sky were mourning the rite about to unfold. Wolves watched from the ring of torches, their forms shifting between man and beast, eyes glinting with the silence of judgment. Lysaria's bare feet touched the obsidian path leading to the bone altar. Each step echoed in her mind like a countdown. Beneath the ceremonial robes lay a blade, slim, curved, forged in the sanctum of Valmyra's temple. The hilt pressed against her ribs with every breath. The second bite. Her palms were cold despite the heat of the flames licking toward the sky. Around her, the air was thick with incense and wet fur. The elders stood unmoving in their crimson cloaks, their expressions etched from stone. Somewhere within their presence, she could feel it, the anticipation of blood, of transformation, of sacrifice. A low murmur swept through the gathering. Malric stepped from the shadows of the Woolguard. He was dressed in nothing but a dark cloak over his shoulders, the silver clasp of his house catching the firelight. Scars latticed his chest like the memory of a war he never spoke of. His eyes, pale as moon-bleached ash, fixed on her and did not waver. He came to her slowly, without ceremony. No crown, no armor, no flourish. Just a predator walking into the center of the storm. She lifted her chin. He reached for her. Her breath caught as he slipped his arms beneath her knees and back, lifting her without a word. The world tilted as he carried her toward the altar. Each heartbeat felt like it echoed through the crowd, bouncing off the ribs of dead gods and old legends. She could feel the tension in him, not from exertion, but restraint. As though carrying her cost him something not physical. When they reached the bone platform, he paused. Snow collected on her lashes. "Don't be afraid," he murmured, voice low against her hair. "You're mine." The words slipped into her like a blade in silk. Not harsh. Not cruel. But absolute. Certain. She didn't answer. Her mouth was too dry. Her fingers tightened around the folds of her robe. He laid her down gently on the stone. The silence that followed was not empty. It pulsed. Around them, the elders began to chant in the ancient tongue, words drawn from the marrow of time. The flames trembled. The scent of burnt sage and iron filled her lungs. The blade in her sleeve was still there. She could feel its weight, its promise. Malric lowered himself over her slowly, bracing his hands on either side of her head. His eyes locked with hers. The chanting faded from her perception, leaving only the sound of her own breath and his. "You tremble," he said. Lysaria turned her head to the side, avoiding his gaze. "It's cold." He reached for her hand, drawing it to his chest. His skin burned under her touch. A furnace of breath and blood and longing. "It won't be," he said. And then the bite began. His lips didn't seek hers. They found the curve of her throat, just beneath her jaw, where the skin pulsed with life. His breath warmed the hollow of her neck. She gasped as his teeth grazed, not pierced, not yet, just enough to make her spine arch and her vision blur. The bond flared to life. But this time it was more than pain or pull. It was heat. Her body responded with a traitorous ache. Her skin tingled, every nerve leaning toward him. She felt the edge of his hunger, veiled and throttled behind centuries of discipline. Felt his breath shudder against her as if he, too, were breaking. She didn't mean to reach for him. But she did. Fingers trailing up his arm to the nape of his neck. She felt the tension there, the way his body clenched against his control. And in that moment, she felt his loneliness. A vast, endless thing. As cold and bright as the moon above them. As full of shadows. He bit down. Pain bloomed, sharp and white and consuming. But with it came something else, his mind, brushing against hers like wildfire caught in a cage. She tasted his silence. His battles. The blood he'd swallowed. The gods he'd defied. And the way he yearned. Not just for her body, but for something he couldn't name. Something she might destroy. She nearly dropped the blade then. It was clutched between her ribs and the weight of his chest, the edge biting against her skin. One motion. That's all it would take. One pull, one plunge between his ribs. The chant would mask it. No one would know until he slumped, breathless, against her. But her fingers faltered. Because he wasn't forcing her. He wasn't devouring her. He was surrendering. Not to her, but to the bond. To fate. To the thing between them that both of them hated and needed. "I feel it too," he whispered against her blood-wet skin. The blade slipped from her fingers. It fell to the altar with a small, traitorous clang. Firelight danced across its blackened edge as it spun, then stilled. The chanting stopped. The elders fell silent. Malric didn't move. He stayed above her, eyes wide open, breath shallow. His gaze flicked to the blade, then back to her. She waited for him to strike. To punish. To rage. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned down, so close their lips almost touched. His voice was soft enough that only she could hear it. "I know you came to kill me." Her throat constricted. She said nothing. He leaned closer still. His breath touched her mouth. "Why didn't you?" Lysaria closed her eyes. "I don't know." He brushed his lips to hers, not in hunger, not in claim, but something far more dangerous. A question. Around them, the wind howled. The moon bled its light across the altar. The torches cracked. But she didn't move. Neither did he. Because they both knew. The kiss had already happened. It was in the blood, in the bite, in the silence between what they were and what they might become. Chapter 8, Secrets in the Garden of Ash. It was called the Garden of Ash, though no ash had ever fallen here. The name clung to it like a wound, old and unhealed. Blackened stone pillars rose like charred ribs from the ground, holding up a fractured lattice roof where weak sunlight filtered through, too pale to burn. And yet, to Lysaria's stunned awe, the light did not sear her skin. She stood beneath it, fully exposed, and felt only warmth, not pain. "This place," she murmured. Malric stood beside her, a hand trailing over the edge of a wilted rose. Its petals were a scorched crimson, like fire frozen in bloom. He didn't look at her. "It was once the Queen's garden," he said softly. "Before the wars. Before the curse." "The sunlight, how?" "There are runes carved beneath the soil," he replied. "A spell older than either of us. One that remembers gentleness." She said nothing. She couldn't. The moment clung too tightly to her ribs. Her hand rose involuntarily to her collarbone, fingertips brushing the fading heat of the bond that pulsed whenever Malric drew near. She hated how it remembered him, how it ached with want when he stood in the silence and spoke in that voice that bled steel and sorrow. He bent, fingers brushing along a stalk of ghostly fern, and said, almost to himself, "Some things, even cursed, still try to live." That's the first lesson this garden teaches. His words sank deep, prying at something she'd buried long ago. Her breath caught. "And what's the second?" He looked at her then. His eyes were wolf-dark and gold-rimmed, a strange sadness flickering behind the usual fire. "The second," he said slowly, "is that even beauty can be a trap. Sometimes what survives isn't what deserves to." The air stretched between them. Lysaria didn't move. Couldn't. She saw him, not just the beast, not just the ruthless Alpha King, but the man left standing in ruins. The man who brought her here not to terrify her, but to share something fragile and half-forgotten. And that terrified her more than any cage. She lowered her gaze, heart thunderstruck, unsure if she wanted to run or stay. But her feet rooted into the ash-tinged grass, betraying her again. Malric tilted his head slightly, as if sensing her confusion, her softening. "I don't want your fear," he said. She looked up sharply. "What do you want?" His gaze dropped, lingering for half a second on her lips. "I want the truth." She opened her mouth, then snapped it shut as a voice sliced through the moment like a blade. "So do I." Everic stood at the archway, cloaked in shadow. His presence cut like frost against the warm light. Eyes sharp, arms crossed, he radiated disapproval. "General," Malric said coolly, though a faint twitch passed over his jaw. "You're interrupting." "I know." Everic stepped forward, his boots soundless on the black stones. His gaze flicked to Lysaria, lingered too long. "A word with your guest." "Alone." Malric's nostrils flared. "Why?" Everic didn't flinch. "Because I'm the only one here who isn't trying to seduce a lie out of her." Lysaria stiffened. Malric's voice dropped into a growl. "Watch your tongue." "You brought her into the sunlight," Everic said. "Isn't that enough risk for one day?" Lysaria took a small step back, tension crackling between the two men like dry leaves over fire. "She's under my protection," Malric said. "And she's under suspicion," Everic countered. Malric took a long breath, then turned to Lysaria. "Go with him. For now. But remember this." He leaned in close, his voice a thread of warmth and warning. "Whatever he says, whatever he tries to do to frighten you, I'll still be here." She nodded once, unsteady, then turned and followed Everic into the deeper corridors of the palace. They didn't speak until they'd reached a narrow hallway cloaked in dust and forgotten banners. Faint torchlight played across the walls. Everic walked like a ghost, silent and swift, and Lysaria kept pace, unwilling to appear weaker than she already felt. When he finally stopped, it was in a small alcove hidden behind a shelf of broken weaponry. He turned to her. "Do you think you're clever?" he asked coldly. Lysaria didn't answer. "Do you think you're the first girl who thought she could smile her way into the king's trust? Into his bed?" Her face flushed, fury and shame warring in her throat. "I've done no such thing. But he looks at you like you matter." Everett's voice was quiet now, but not soft. "And that will get you killed." "Why do you care?" she shot back. His gaze locked on hers. Something flickered, fury, grief, something else she couldn't name. "Because," he said, "I've seen what happens to the ones who get too close. He burns them." She narrowed her eyes. "And you? Did you burn too?" His jaw tensed. "That's none of your concern." "Then stay out of mine." For a heartbeat, they stared at each other, two blades drawn in silence. Then Everett said, "He's not stupid, Lysaria. If you make him believe you're his salvation, his light in the ash, he will never let you go. Even if he has to chain you with fire." Her lips trembled, but she held firm. "Maybe I don't want to go." He recoiled as if she'd slapped him. "Then you're more lost than I thought." She turned before he could say more, before she saw whatever cracked behind his eyes, and fled back toward her chambers. The winding corridors blurred around her, breath shallow in her chest. When she reached the door, she shoved it open and slammed it shut behind her. Only then did she realize she was shaking. She went to the desk for water and found the letter. Velmyra's seal. Wax cracked. Her throat tightened. "He has recognized you. Tonight, it must be done." Lysaria stared at the parchment, bow rising. Her hands trembled as she crushed it, once, twice, and then tore it into 1,000 pale scraps. But not before the tears came. Not before she crumpled to the floor and buried her face in her hands, heart roaring like a beast caught between mercy and murder. Outside, the sun slipped lower, bleeding red through the high-stained glass. And in the distance, the ash garden began to bloom again. Chapter 9. The Priestess's Chains. The moment Lysaria's head touched the pillow, sleep refused to come. The golden threads of the bed canopy shimmered faintly in the moonlight, cast like a spell over her vision. Her fingers clutched at the edge of the silk sheets, breath shallow, body taut with a fear she couldn't name. Something in the air tonight was wrong. Too still. Too quiet. The silence pressed in on her chest like water rising in a sealed room. Then came the scent, ashes and jasmine. Sweet and acrid. Her limbs froze. She sat upright, but her body moved sluggishly, like she was underwater. The shadows at the edge of the chamber shifted, folding inward like petals closing around her. From the corner, a voice bloomed like a thorned vine. "You look comfortable," Velmyra whispered, her voice velvet-wrapped steel. "But comfort dulls the blade. And you were born to cut, not rest." Lysaria tried to stand, but invisible coils latched onto her wrists, her ankles. Heat licked up her spine like tongues of fire, and suddenly she was no longer in her chamber. The walls melted away. She stood now in a blinding white space, yet she cast no shadow. The floor was a mirror of obsidian, and her reflection stared back at her, helpless, wide-eyed, trembling. From above, chains of fire twisted downward, coiling like serpents around her wrists and throat, searing hot but leaving no mark. She screamed, but no sound escaped her throat. Velmyra's silhouette emerged from the light. No longer the high priestess she had known, but something far older. Her face was smooth as marble, eyes molten with gold, her hair flowing like ink in water. She hovered inches above the ground, as if no longer tethered by human bones. "You forget who carved you from the flame," Velmyra murmured, circling her. "Who gave your breath meaning?" Lysaria gasped. Her knees buckled. The chains pulled tighter, dragging her to the mirrored floor. "You are mine, Lysaria. My vessel. My voice. I didn't ask to be any of that." Lysaria choked. A sharp laugh rang out. "No, but the gods rarely wait for consent." Velmyra's voice dropped, low and vicious. "The blood of the wolves cannot abide betrayal. And your silence is treason." From the mirror beneath her, a dozen reflections began to flicker, her face distorted by pain, fire licking the corners of her mouth, chains etched into her skin like tattoos. They whispered to her in tongues she couldn't understand, begging her to submit, to break, to burn. Valmyra raised a hand, and a spectral blade appeared. Not of metal, but of flame, pulsing with every beat of Lysaria's heart. "This is what purity costs," Valmyra said softly. "To be made whole again, you must be cleansed." "No," Lysaria's throat constricted as the fiery blade inched toward her. Valmyra's fingers brushed the hilt, and suddenly her voice was everywhere, filling the air, echoing in the hollows of Lysaria's bones. "You want to live? Prove you deserve it. Kill the one who sees too much, before he rips your mask away." The blade moved, but just before it touched her skin, light shattered the scene. With a deafening crack, the illusion crumbled like glass struck by iron. Valmyra's image burned to ash mid-sentence. The chains dissolved into smoke. Lysaria collapsed forward, gasping for air as color and weight returned to the world. She was on the cold floor of her chamber. Her breath came in frantic sobs. Her body slick with sweat, hair clinging to her temples. The scent of real smoke curled under the door. Then, bang! The door burst open. Everick stood in the threshold, sword half drawn, eyes darker than the storm outside. For a heartbeat, he said nothing. His gaze swept the room, found her crumpled on the floor, dress torn, hands shaking. He stepped inside, sheathed his blade, and slammed the door shut behind him. Lysaria blinked up at him, voice broken. I couldn't move." "Save it," he growled. She flinched. He strode forward, yanked a blanket from the bed, and tossed it at her without meeting her eyes. "You think you can outwit her? You think you can dance between gods and kings and not pay the price?" "I didn't choose this," she whispered. "Neither did we." He turned his back, shoulders like stone beneath his coat. "But some of us survive without losing our minds." His hands curled into fists at his sides. She clutched the blanket tighter. "You saved me. Don't flatter yourself." "Then why?" Her voice cracked. He was silent for a moment too long. Then his voice, low and bitter. "Because if you die like that, screaming under her chains, he'll bleed for you. He'll blame himself." Lysaria's breath caught. Everick's voice dropped to a hush, almost a confession. "And he doesn't deserve that." She watched him, heart pounding, suddenly seeing something behind the anger. Something that flickered in his jawline, in the tightness around his mouth, in the way he didn't look at her, couldn't look. He stepped toward the door. "You have no idea what you're playing with, Lysaria," he said. "Next time, don't be so foolish as to think you're alone in this palace." The door clicked shut behind him. She stayed kneeling on the floor for a long time, the chill from the stone slowly seeping into her bones. The fire in the hearth crackled, oblivious. Her eyes wandered to the edge of her nightstand. A small slip of parchment had been left behind. With trembling fingers, she picked it up. The ink was in Valmyra's hand. "He has recognized you. Tonight it must end." Lysaria stared at the words until they blurred. Then slowly, she tore the note into pieces. Tiny, fluttering pieces that scattered across the floor like burnt petals. She curled into herself, tears sliding down her cheeks, silent and hot. And in the darkness, she whispered the name she wasn't supposed to care for. Malric. Chapter 10. The Wolf in Her Veins. The first thing Lysaria felt was not pain, but weightlessness. She floated in the dark, suspended between heartbeat and oblivion, where nothing tethered her to flesh. Then came the sting, sharp and hot, like embers stirred into old wounds, and a voice that did not belong to her. "Why do you resist what is already yours?" The question slithered through her like smoke, curling in the hollow of her chest. She tried to answer, but her lips wouldn't move. Then came light, silver and searing, bursting behind her eyes. She gasped as her body arched violently off the cot. "Hold her," someone barked. Rough hands pressed down on her shoulders. Cloth rustled. Metal clinked. There was the scent of bitter roots, of burning herbs, of something raw and not her own bleeding into the air. "She's waking," murmured a voice, low, reverent, shaken. "And look, her veins." Lysaria's eyelids fluttered open, heavy as if sewn shut. A haze veiled her sight, but even through the blur, she saw it. Her arms were bound with soft cords, not for restraint but for examination. Beneath her pale skin, something pulsed, slow and strange, a silver sheen flickering through each vein like starlight caught in blood. "She's not fully human," the healer said. "Or not anymore." "Speak plainly," came Everett's cold voice from the shadows. "We have no time for riddles." The physician flinched but obeyed. "This is old magic. I've only read of it in fragments. The blood of a Lupin ancestor, awakened by proximity to a compatible Alpha." He hesitated. "Perhaps even a cursed lineage." Silence thickened the air. "Compatible?" Everett echoed, the word a quiet blade. The physician nodded, lowering his gaze. "It responds to a specific line. Royal. Ancient. Perhaps the blood of the Obsidian Keep." No one spoke. Then a deep growl reverberated beyond the walls. Another. Then more, overlapping. A guttural symphony rising outside. Everett's eyes sharpened. "What in the God's name is that?" The physician paled. "The southern training field lies just below us." "That sound, it's the werewolves." Without waiting, Everett strode to the door and flung it open. The air was thick with the scent of storm-churned earth and something more primal, wolf musk, fear, the tang of dominance challenged. "Bring her," he said. No one dared argue. They helped Lysaria to her feet. Her knees trembled. Her hands were still cold, but her vision cleared with every step. Her hearing sharpened. When she stepped into the corridor, her pulse aligned with something deeper, something older. It thudded beneath the stone like a second heart. The moment they reached the arch overlooking the training field, the breath in her lungs caught. Below, a dozen wolves stood in a loose semicircle. Not ordinary ones, these were bred for battle, thick with muscle and scar, their eyes gleaming amber and gold. And every single one had lowered its head to her. Some knelt fully. One even rolled halfway onto its back, exposing its throat with a low, shuddering growl of reverence. Gasps echoed behind her. "Goddess," someone whispered. "She's a queen," the healer choked. But Lysaria didn't feel like royalty. She felt wrong. Empty. The wolf's eyes shone not with welcome, but recognition. And recognition was dangerous. Recognition meant she had no more shadows to hide in. A familiar voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Look at me, Malric." He stood at the edge of the platform, his presence like a storm held barely in check. For once, his armor wasn't pristine. His hair was wind-tossed. A line of blood, not his, darkened the edge of his sleeve. But it was his eyes that halted her breath. He looked at her as if something sacred had cracked open before him. As if the wolf's obeisance had confirmed a fear he hadn't wanted to name. "You're not here to kill me," he said quietly. She blinked, mouth dry. "I don't." He stepped closer. "You were never sent to destroy me. You were left, by something far crueler than fate. Left in my path, not to end it, but to become part of it." The weight of his words struck deeper than any blow. "You're what the curse didn't expect," he said. "You're what the throne couldn't account for." Lysaria shook her head slowly. "I don't want to be anyone's prophecy." A corner of his mouth lifted, wry and tired. "You think I do?" The wind shifted. Behind them, Everett exhaled audibly. His voice cut in with quiet steel. "You should rest." Lysaria turned. He stood at the periphery, his expression as unreadable as ever, save for a tension in his jaw, the way his hand curled slightly near the hilt of his blade. "You've been watching me," she said. He didn't deny it. "Why?" The pause was long. She thought he might lie or ignore her. Instead, he answered without meeting her gaze. "Because you will destroy him." She felt the truth of it hit her like a slap. You think I want to? He turned away, shoulders stiff. It doesn't matter what you want. You were made to. He walked off before she could reply, leaving only silence and the soft sound of wolves whimpering beneath her feet. Chapter 11. Nyra's Lament. The air was wet with moss and something older, something that breathed through the stones themselves. Lysaria stepped lightly over gnarled roots and thorned underbrush, the hem of her gown catching on brambles that seemed to reach for her ankles like warning hands. Moonlight spilled between the tall black trees like spilt milk, the forest whispering secrets only wolves could understand. And yet it was not a wolf that had called her here. It had been a voice in a dream. A lament. A long, dragging howl rising over blood-colored stone. The further she wandered from Obsidian Keep, the louder it echoed in her bones. Something pulled at her, not like Malric's command, not like Everett's gaze. This was older than obedience, deeper than dread. It was as if her blood had memory, and that memory had grown restless. She passed a line of carved stone, moss-eaten and crumbling with age. Beyond it, the trees parted like curtains, revealing a clearing half swallowed by ruins. Pillars, fractured and leaning, formed a broken circle around a raised dais. Vines clung to their flanks, but nothing could obscure the red glow of the glyphs carved into the stone. They pulsed. With every beat, Lysaria felt something inside her tighten, like a string winding taut in her ribs. She stepped into the circle. The moment her bare foot touched the dais, the air shifted. Cold. Sweet. Sickly. A scent like burning flowers and old metal. Then, "Why did you come, little star?" The voice unfurled behind her like silk soaked in poison. Lysaria turned. A woman stood in the shadows between the pillars, her figure cloaked in layers of torn velvet, crowned with bone-white thorns. Her hair was silver, matted with dried blood. Her eyes, one gold, one clouded, shimmered in the dark like foxfire. She was beautiful the way a ruin is beautiful. Cracked. Doomed. And holding too many memories. Are you Nyra?" Lysaria whispered. The woman smiled, showing two sharp teeth. "Once. That was the name I wore when I was a bride. But I have been many things since." She stepped forward barefoot, her toes red with something that was not mud. "I dreamed of you," Lysaria said before she could stop herself. "Of course you did," Nyra crooned. "All cursed things call to one another." Lysaria's breath caught. "I'm not cursed." "Not yet," Nyra said. She tilted her head, studying her like a wolf eyeing a wounded deer. "But you carry the vessel. And soon, it will bloom." "What vessel?" Nyra's hand shot out and grabbed Lysaria's wrist. Her grip was ice and fire at once. "You felt it already, didn't you? When they bowed to you. When your blood lit silver. When even he looked at you not like prey, but like penance." Lysaria flinched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, you do." Nyra's voice dropped. "He thinks you're his salvation. But you're the key, girl. The lock was forged in ancient sin, and now it wants to open again." "You mean Malric?" Lysaria asked hoarsely. Nyra smiled again, wider this time. He devoured his brother beneath the black sun. And still the curse was not satisfied. Lysaria's stomach turned. "What curse?" "The one that made you," Nyra whispered. "The one that called you across salt and stone and silence. You're not his healer. You're his undoing." Her fingers curled tighter around Lysaria's wrist, nails biting deep. "Kill him before he marks you. Kill him, and you'll be free." Lysaria yanked her hand back, heart thundering. "I'm not going to kill anyone." Nyra laughed. It was wild, lovely, broken. "That's what I said too." The laughter stopped abruptly. And then the air went cold. Lysaria turned, something moving, no, slithering, in the trees. She reached instinctively for the dagger at her hip, but it was not her hands that saved her. A blade shimmered through the air. And shadows split apart. Malric landed between her and the forest's edge, sword glowing with an eerie white light. "Back," he ordered. The thing in the trees hissed and retreated, if it had ever been there at all. Lysaria was shaking, her throat raw from unscreamed panic. He turned and looked at her, not with fury, not with command, but with something gentler. Something darker. "I told you not to wander," he said, voice low. She swallowed. "I heard something. I dreamed of this place." He glanced past her to the dais. His jaw clenched. "She spoke to you, didn't she?" he asked. Lysaria didn't answer. Malric stepped closer until the heat of him pressed against her chilled skin. "She's not what she once was." The curse took her piece by piece until nothing remained but whispers and wounds. "She said I would doom you," Lysaria whispered. "She said, I'm the key." His expression did not change, but his hands, still bloodied from the fight, closed around her arms. "You are," he said simply, "but not in the way she thinks." She searched his eyes for lies. Found only fire. "Then tell me the truth." He exhaled slowly, jaw tight. "Not yet." And before she could pull away, he bent down and lifted her, arms solid beneath her knees and back. She stiffened. "I can walk," she protested, even as her fingers curled against his chest. "I didn't ask," he replied. He carried her away from the ruins. The night behind them whispered like a warning. But in his arms, she felt the danger beat louder in her chest than even Naira's mad words. "You didn't deny it," she said softly. "That I'm cursed." "No," he said, eyes on the path ahead. "But maybe curses are just broken blessings. Ones that haven't remembered how to heal yet." Her breath caught. And then, a rustle. A figure. Everic. He stepped from the shadows just before they reached the keep's edge. His cloak was soaked from the dew, his face pale in the moonlight. He didn't speak. Just watched. Malric didn't stop. Lysaria lifted her head from Malric's shoulder, met Everic's gaze. "Why do you keep looking at me?" she asked, voice barely more than air. Everic's throat worked. His jaw clenched. Then he turned away. "Because you'll destroy him," he said, and vanished into the dark. Lysaria said nothing more, but the words burned in her chest long after she was laid to rest in the keep's quiet halls. Not salvation. Not redemption. Not even love. Only fire waiting for a match. And the howling had only just begun. Chapter 12. The Pale Alpha's Whisper. The moonlight poured in thin silver blades across the silk-draped canopy of the sleeping chamber, cutting through the shadow-thickened corners where the fire dared not glow. Lysaria lay beneath the heavy velvet covers, her skin clammy with sweat, her breath caught in her throat. A sound, no, a presence, slithered between the folds of her dreaming. It was colder than shadow, older than stone. The wind outside the keep had long since died, but in her dream it howled like a creature giving birth to grief. She stood barefoot on glass-like rock, pale and cracked. A valley stretched before her like a broken ribcage. Bone spires jutted from the ground in twisted angles. The sky was hollow, starless, drained of time. From the edge of the chasm, something stirred. It emerged slowly, as if not bound by the laws of movement. First a claw, white as frostbitten bone. Then a paw. Then a head crowned in antlered ridges, eye sockets deep and glowing with memory, not life. The great beast, no, the god, the thing, towered above her, ribcage rattling with every breathless word. "You feel it, don't you?" it said, though its maw did not move. The voice came from beneath her skin. Lysaria tried to speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "The bond is a lie. His blood sings too loud, it drowns you." The creature padded closer, leaving no tracks on the ground. Its body was a lattice of pale bones and shadow sinew, massive yet insubstantial. "You were never meant to kneel beside him. You were meant to break him." Her pulse throbbed in her temples. Her legs would not move. The air thickened, tightened. "You were made for me." The pale Alpha lowered its head to hers, exhaling decay and prophecy. "Kill him. End the cycle. And I will crown you in ruin and flame." Its tongue, forked and bone-white, licked across her collarbone, and Lysaria gasped awake. She bolted upright in the bed, the sheets tangled around her thighs, her skin ice-cold. Her breath was a trapped thing fluttering against the cage of her ribs. The chamber was silent, but her wrist burned. She threw back the coverlet and stared. There, etched beneath the skin, just above the old crescent scar, was a new symbol. Blood-red and raw, a knot of unfamiliar runes spiraling inwards like a curse laid by a forgotten god. The door creaked open. She scrambled to cover her arm, too late. Malric stood at the threshold, his bare chest streaked with damp from the storm outside. His eyes, storm-dark and unreadable, dropped to her wrist, then rose. Slowly. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, "It spoke to you, didn't it?" She didn't answer. He crossed the room in 2 strides. The firelight gilded his skin in gold and shadow, the scent of the rain still clinging to him. He knelt at her bedside, the weight of his gaze anchoring her to the moment. His hand reached for hers, gentle, but with the finality of a locked gate. He lifted her arm. The symbol pulsed once, faintly. His thumb brushed the edge of it. A tremor ran through him. "Did it offer you freedom?" he asked softly. Her throat worked. It said I was his." Malric's jaw flexed. "He lies. Always has." I felt, her voice cracked. Like I was disappearing. Like I wanted to follow him into the dark. He pulled her wrist to his chest, pressing it against the thrum of his heart. "You are not his. You are not anyone's," but he caught himself. His voice lowered, barely audible. "You are mine." The word echoed louder in her head than it should have. She stared up at him. "You can't own me." A flicker of emotion crossed his face. Not anger. Not yet. Something more raw. "I don't want to own you," he said. "I want to keep you." A pause. His lips ghosted across her temple. "But I will burn down whatever tries to take you from me." His voice trembled, just slightly, and that frightened her more than the pale Alpha's whisper. She pulled back, trembling. "Malric, I don't know what's real anymore." "Then trust what you feel." His hand came up, cupped her jaw. She leaned into the touch, before she could stop herself. "I feel," she whispered, "like I'm falling." "Then fall," he murmured, and kissed her. It was not tender. It was the kind of kiss that carved open the space between pain and longing. His mouth moved over hers like he was trying to erase the memory of something else. Her hands tangled in his hair, dragging him closer, anchoring herself to the only warmth that didn't come from fire. His weight pushed her back into the bed. His breath was everywhere. She arched, helpless to stop the way her body responded. Something between desperation and surrender bloomed in her chest. Then he stopped. He pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. "I'll never hurt you," he said hoarsely. "You already have." Silence. The wind knocked against the windows like a thing locked out of time. He rose, pulled the blanket over her, and turned toward the hearth. But didn't leave. Instead, he sat beside the flames and watched them burn, his hands resting on his knees, as if afraid they might do something else if left unchecked. Lysaria lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. When she finally drifted back to sleep, the pale Alpha was waiting. This time, it didn't speak. It only watched her from across the chasm, eyes glowing with something far older than desire. And when she woke, Malric was still there. He hadn't moved. He was watching her. Like he was afraid to blink. Like he couldn't tell the difference between her and a ghost. Chapter 13. Chains Beneath the Altar. The sky was a vault of ash above Bone Hollow, and even the moon hid her face. The path to the bone altar coiled through cragged rock and silence, the air heavy with the taste of old iron and snow left too long in the dark. Lysaria followed Malric in silence, her footsteps light but uncertain. Each echo off the cavern walls sounded like a question with no answer. Their shadows stretched impossibly long across the frost-etched steps. Ahead, the altar waited, an obsidian slab rising from the mountain's open wound. Malric's broad shoulders were tense beneath his dark cloak, his pace steady, though he never looked back. He had not spoken much since her fevered awakening. Not about the whisper she'd heard. Not about the pale wolf with eyes like moons. She didn't ask. Because the moment she named it, she feared it would become real. At the altar's base, he paused and turned to her, his voice low. "From here, you must stay close to me. Do not speak unless I ask. Do not touch anything you don't understand." "I never understand anything in this place," Lysaria murmured. Her voice was sharper than she meant. He looked at her then. Not with anger, but with something heavier. "You're not here to understand," he said. "You're here to survive it." He pressed his hand flat against the altar. Runes flared to life beneath his palm, ancient and bone-pale, pulsing with quiet menace. A grinding groan split the stillness as the slab shifted, revealing a spiral stair descending into blackness. He held out his hand to her. "Come." She took it. The descent was slow and stifling. The air thickened with every step. Walls once smooth gave way to ridges, etched claw marks or the scars of things dragged unwilling through stone. The heat should not have been there, but it was damp, pulsing, almost living. Lysaria's breath caught as they reached the bottom. The chamber opened wide and circular, ribbed like the inside of a colossal beast. In its heart, a pit yawned, a chasm ringed by iron pylons, runes carved in circles around its edge. Chains slithered from the ceiling like veins, descending into the depths. And there, wrapped in those chains like a crown of thorns, a skeletal wolf. Massive, twisted, long since dead and yet not. Its bones shimmered with trapped moonlight, marrowless but humming. Runes burned into the surface of its spine. Its mouth hung open in a soundless snarl, fangs still sharp, still stained. Lysaria backed up instinctively. "What is that?" she whispered. Malric did not look at her. His jaw was tight. A sacrifice that tried to become a god. And failed. It still waits to be worshipped. The shadows on the far wall rippled. Then they stepped forward. Naira. Her form was thinner than a breath, all shimmer and sorrow and rot. But the voice was unmistakable. Cold. Laughing. "You came, little bloodflower," she said. "You came to see what your womb was made for." Lysaria's hands clenched at her sides. "You're dead." "Oh, child." "So is he." Naira tilted her head toward the chained bones. "And yet, we linger." Malric moved to shield Lysaria, but she didn't retreat. "What do you mean, what I'm made for?" Naira's laugh rippled through the chamber like a crack in the world. "Don't you feel it? In your veins? The pull to the old power, to the hull beneath the world. You carry what I could not hold. You will succeed where I broke." "No," Lysaria breathed. "Yes," Naira said. "You will take my place. You will become the bride of ruin." The pit below pulsed. Something in the chains shuddered, rattling, calling. Lysaria's knees buckled. Her breath hitched, her mind awash in strange fire. Her skin burned with a symbol trying to emerge beneath it, glowing through her flesh like heat behind thin paper. She saw flashes, a forest drowning in white flame, wolves with their throats ripped out, a crown forged of ribs. The skeletal wolf moved. Just slightly. But it moved. Its jaw cracked wider, a sound like marrow breaking. "Lysaria." Malric caught her before she could fall into the pit. She screamed, hands grasping at her temples as if she could claw the visions out. The rune on her wrist burned, and something answered. "No, no," her voice dissolved. "It's inside me." "Look at me," Malric growled, his hand clasping the back of her neck, grounding her, anchoring her to the only warmth in this dead place. "Look at me." "I can't." "You will." His voice struck something in her, deep, desperate, unshakable. She forced her eyes to him. He cut his palm. Before she could protest, he pressed the bleeding wound to her mark. His blood touched the rune, and a shock went through her, as if the world inverted for a heartbeat. Her back arched, breath stolen. She screamed again, but this time, it was something leaving her, not entering. The chains below stilled. The bones quieted. Naira was gone. Only the flicker of her laughter remained, clinging to the corners of the room. Malric was breathing hard. He looked pale, sweat beading on his temple. His hand was still pressed to hers, his blood mingling with the smoking rune. His thumb trembled against her skin. "You shouldn't have done that," Lysaria whispered, stunned. "You could have." "I didn't come here to lose you," he said hoarsely. He leaned closer, forehead nearly touching hers. "You're not a vessel," he murmured. "You're not a curse. And you are not meant to bear this alone." She blinked fast, the last heat of pain still echoing in her limbs. "You said I was brought here as an offering." "I lied." His voice was quiet, but it rang louder than any scream. "You're not the offering," he said. "You're the fire that burns the altar." She didn't know whether to hit him or kiss him. Instead, she slumped into his chest, exhausted. He caught her easily, as if he'd expected it. They stayed like that in the breathless dark. "You bled for me," she whispered, almost ashamed. "I would bleed more," he said, his mouth brushing the crown of her head, "if it meant keeping you mine." And then softer, like a sin he couldn't stop confessing. "I don't want to lose you." Lysaria closed her eyes. And for the first time, she let herself believe he meant it, even if she didn't know how to survive it. Chapter 14, The Bite That Binds Two. The warmth of firelight painted gold across the stone walls of Malric's chambers, softening the harsh lines of carved wolves and celestial crests. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent, casting the garden in hues of molten rose and deep wine. Inside, the air was heavier, thick with things unspoken, with the weight of what must come next. Lysaria stood near the hearth, arms wrapped around herself, though the heat wrapped her shoulders like a shawl. She had not changed out of the pale ceremonial robes from the altar. The sleeves hung long, brushing her knuckles, already stained by the dust of bone and ash from the deep. She didn't look up when he entered. Malric closed the door with a whispering click. "You shouldn't be on your feet." "I'm not breaking," she said, voice soft. "Just unraveling." He crossed the space between them slowly, not like a king, but like a man walking toward something fragile enough to shatter underfoot. "That's why we do this now." Before the next thread phrase, Lysaria finally looked up. His gaze was steady, but not cold. There was something deeply human in the way he looked at her tonight. Not as the child of a curse. Not as a symbol of prophecy. But as someone he had chosen. "The second mark will anchor your bloodline," he said. "Without it, the chains below will keep pulling." "You saw it." She nodded slowly. "The wolf, it wasn't just Naira, was it? That thing was a memory. Naira was merely a vessel. What you saw was older. Malformed by time, wrath, and need. And it woke when your blood touched the altar." His voice dropped. "We cannot let it stir again." Lysaria swallowed. "So, the mark. Is it like the first?" Malric's jaw clenched faintly. "No. This one binds spirit. Not flesh." He held out a hand. She stared at it. It was absurd how steady it was. How warm. She remembered those same fingers slick with blood, pressing against her when the chains screamed beneath the altar. But now, they simply waited. "I trust you," she whispered, and placed her hand in his. He didn't smile. Didn't need to. He led her to the divan by the wide windows. Moonlight began to spill across the floor, silvering the petals of the star blossoms he'd let grow wild on the sill. The wind smelled of lavender and something headier, like rain against stone, like crushed myrrh and ash. She sat. He knelt. She gasped softly, not at the cold of the stone floor beneath his knees, but at the reverence in his movements. Like this wasn't a ritual, but a confession. Malric leaned in, his breath brushing the curve of her throat. "Once I begin, there's no turning back. You must hold nothing back from me." She nodded, heart hammering. His mouth found the junction of her shoulder and neck, where her pulse beat too fast. But he didn't bite. Not yet. His breath lingered. His lips brushed skin, feather-light. And when she tilted her head to give him more room, he paused. "I will never take from you what you are not willing to give." The words settled into her bones, heavier than any spell. She exhaled and tilted her chin higher. The bite was not a pain, but a deep, sinking warmth, like being touched at the center of her. Her breath hitched. The moment stretched, thick with heat and something spiraling dangerously close to need. Power moved between them. Not fire, but thread. A tether sewn not through magic, but through something more feral. Her mind blurred. Images flickered, his grief, her loneliness, his hunger, her fear. And underneath all of it, the same aching, unspeakable need. She gripped his shoulders, trembling. "Malric." He didn't answer, only held her closer, as if afraid she might dissolve. Then her hands moved, without thought, trailing down his back, pulling him in. Her body no longer frozen, no longer guarded. She clung to him like she belonged nowhere else. His mouth left her neck, but his arms didn't loosen. She pressed her face into his collarbone, trembling from something far older than cold. "I felt you," she whispered. "When I thought I was falling. You were the only thing that called me back." He didn't reply with words. His touch deepened, not possessive but reverent, drawing her toward him until no part of her body could pretend it didn't need him. And she let herself need. She let herself drown in the feeling. Time passed unnoticed. The world faded, except for the pulse of blood between their bond and the warmth of him, so close, so real. Outside the half-open door, Everick stood in the shadows. He'd come as soon as the tremors began. Heard Lysaria cry out once, not in pain, but in surrender. He did not go in. The flicker of candlelight outlined her silhouette against the window. And Malric's head bent over her as if in prayer. Everick looked down. The knuckles of his hand were white against the hilt of his sword. Then he turned and walked away. Back inside, Lysaria stirred in Malric's arms. Her cheeks were damp. She hadn't realized she'd wept. Malric's thumb brushed her cheekbone, but his hand lingered afterward, cradling her face as if it were the only thing anchoring him. She looked up at him. "You didn't have to." "I did. You're the king. That doesn't matter tonight." She swallowed hard. "You risked yourself to anchor me. You bled for me. I would again." Her lips parted, but she couldn't speak. Not when everything inside her felt like it had been burned clean. He pulled her against his chest. His heartbeat was steady, unshaken. "You're not a curse," he murmured into her hair. "You're not a vessel. You're not a warning. Then what am I?" He kissed the top of her head. "You're the one I cannot bear to lose." The moonlight spilled quietly over them. The bond between them pulsed like a second heartbeat, echoing through the silence of the palace. Neither of them said another word. Neither needed to. Chapter 15. The Day the Chains Stirred. The letter arrived in the lightless hour before dawn, borne not by raven but by a silver-winged hawk cloaked in twilight feathers. It landed atop the obsidian keep's gatehouse, talons clinking against ancient stone. Everick was the one who retrieved it, gloved hands steady, eyes darker than the storm gathering on the horizon. He didn't need to open it to know who had sent it. The seal alone, wax pressed with a star-burst sigil, was a whisper of danger. Velmyra. The parchment was unfurled before Malric within the inner sanctum. The candlelight flickered against his jaw as he read the words aloud, each syllable cold and clinical. "By order of the Temple Council and in the name of the moonbound doctrine, we demand the safe return of the sanctified vessel, Lysaria of the marked blood. Refusal to comply shall be seen as heresy and war." Silence followed. Lysaria stood behind Malric, shrouded in the velvet blue of his private chamber, fingers clutching the fabric of her tunic so tightly the seams protested. She didn't ask to see the letter. She could feel it, her name like iron in the air, the weight of prophecy settling on her chest. "So she makes her move," Malric said, not lifting his gaze. "She expected we would fold," Everick murmured from the side. folding the parchment again. But she forgets this is not the temple's marble floor she treads now. It's black rock and wolf blood. Malric didn't respond. His silence was never passive. It was coiling, waiting, a blade still in its sheath. She'll come in full force, Lysaria whispered, not for them but herself. She'll bring the chains, the priests, the brands of fire. Malric's voice was iron. She can bring the heavens down if she dares. You are not hers to reclaim. But the chains did stir. That same evening, when the sun hung low like a blistering wound on the edge of the ashlands, the earth beneath the bone moon altar began to hum. At first it was only a subtle vibration, like breath trembling before a scream, but then the stone floor beneath the temple cracked with a sound like ribs splitting under pressure. The chains, ancient and rusted, tethered to the altar since the time of the old wolf kings, began to twitch. No hands touched them. No wind stirred them. Yet they moved. Lysaria felt it from 3 halls away. She collapsed mid-step in the corridor, the air sucked from her lungs as a searing fire threaded through her spine. Her mark blazed, not with heat, but with a cold so vicious it split the mind. She clawed at her throat, gasping, as if something inside her was breaking free. Everett caught her before she hit the stone. He didn't ask questions. He didn't flinch. He simply lifted her into his arms, voice low and urgent. She's burning up. Malric appeared at the corridor's end like a shadow hardened into form. One look at Lysaria and his face turned to ice. She's reacting to the altar, he said. It's awakening her blood. We need to suppress it, Everett said, breath tight. Before it kills her. Lysaria writhed between them, half lost to the storm boiling beneath her skin. She saw things not of this world, teeth like spears, eyes like moons, wolves made of smoke circling a dying star. Her voice cracked as she spoke through the madness. He's calling. The one who waits, in chains. He knows I'm here. Malric pressed his palm to her forehead. Cold sweat pooled under his hand. I won't let him take you. He carried her into the heart of the keep, deeper than the war rooms, deeper than the vaults. Into a sanctum only he and the dead kings before him had walked. There, beneath the carved arches of the crypt, stood the watchfire, a well of wolf flame that once crowned every alpha of the north. Lysaria thrashed. She didn't see stone. She saw bone. She didn't feel hands. She felt claws. Malric sat with her, cradling her against his chest, as if proximity alone could anchor her. Everett stood at a distance, jaw clenched, watching, always watching, with that unreadable gaze. He said nothing. He would always say nothing. When the tremors subsided, she lay still. But her lips were bloodless, and her eyes had rolled white. She needs to sleep, Malric whispered. But if we delay longer, the chains will break. Then what do we do? Everett asked. Malric met his eyes across the darkness. We prepare. That night, the castle changed. Obsidian Keep's outer ramparts surged with soldiers in blackened steel. Horns were tested, watchfires relit, wolves tethered for war. Everett barked orders from the high wall, his voice like flint striking iron. No one slept. No one dared. In the garden, though, all was quiet. Lysaria stood alone among the sunless roses, her cloak billowing in the windless air. She touched the edge of her collarbone, where the twin bite marks still pulsed faintly. The second mark had silenced the screaming in her blood, but now a different kind of ache took root. Malric appeared behind her, silent as always. But she felt him. You should be resting, he said. She turned to him. Her face was calm. Too calm. They're coming for me. I know. They'll use my body as a lockpick, she said flatly. And my death as a warning. Not if I turn the lock to ash before they arrive. His voice was gentle. Too gentle for a man so feared. He reached out, brushing a curl of hair behind her ear. She closed her eyes. I can feel it, she whispered. The ancient hunger. The one buried beneath the altar. It wants to be born through me. Malric's hands curled around her shoulders, steadying her. You are not a vessel. You are not a gate. Then what am I? His answer was quiet. Mine. She looked up. Her eyes were shimmering, but no tears fell. Her voice broke anyway. Why are you doing this? Why risk your kingdom, your people, for me? He didn't speak. Instead, he pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. She felt his heart, heard the steady thrum like war drums muffled beneath skin. She waited for an answer, but he only held her tighter. Above them, clouds gathered like wolves circling a feast. And far below, in the hidden hollows of the keep, the altar chains sang again. Not with violence, but with longing, as if something old had remembered its name. Chapter 16. Chains of the Crown. The throne room of Obsidian Keep had never been so silent. It wasn't the respectful quiet of solemnity, nor the tense hush before battle. It was something heavier, charged with judgment, laced with disdain. The nobles of the Blackridge clan stood in their ceremonial finery, like rows of sharpened blades. Their silver-threaded cloaks whispered of old power, of bloodlines unbroken and wars won in the name of their own. And in the center of it all stood Lysaria. The obsidian tiles beneath her bare feet were cold, polished to a mirror's edge. Her dress, deep crimson silk that clung like flame, swirled gently in the stagnant air. Her pulse beat too loud in her ears as the echo of Malric's voice settled like a verdict over the room. By right of Alpha, and by oath of blood, he declared, each word a strike of iron, Lysaria shall stand as Queen of Obsidian Keep. From this day forward, she is mine in bond, in rule, and in name. Silence. Then a voice, low and jagged, broke the stillness. She is no queen, growled Lord Werewolf, a hulking elder with storm-gray hair and bloodshot eyes. She is fire-born filth. A sun-marked witch in wolfskin. Gasps, murmurs, one or two snarls. Lysaria did not flinch. She carries no blood of the old clans. She was not chosen by the moon. This is heresy. Another elder stepped forward, his tone calmer but no less cutting. Your Majesty, we do not question your right to take a mate, but to crown her. His eyes slid over Lysaria like a blade. To place her above our daughters, our betrothed, our generations of pureblood heirs? That is more than a bond, it is a betrayal. Lysaria's fingers curled at her sides. She could feel it again, the faint tremor deep in her veins. Not fear, no, something darker. Something ancient, coiled in the pit of her chest like a sleeping animal disturbed by light. Malric stepped forward, the silver pauldrons on his shoulders catching torchlight like bone. You forget yourselves, he said, not raising his voice, but making the room listen. She is my mate. My choice. My queen. She is not of us, someone hissed from the side. That was when the sword came free. It made no sound, just a whisper of steel, followed by a sharper hush. Everic stood at the edge of the dais, expressionless, a single gleaming blade extended between the heir and descent. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The blade spoke for him. He turned his head slightly, just enough for the light to catch the scar under his eye, and his gaze swept the hall with the precision of someone who'd gutted traitors before breakfast. He moved to stand behind Malric, shield and shadow both, and the nobles shifted back instinctively. A man like Everic didn't threaten. He warned. Lord Werewolf, teeth bared in restraint, took a step back. So the crown now answers by steel, not blood? Everic said nothing. The sword remained. Lysaria's breath trembled in her throat. Her pulse beat against her collarbone as Malric stepped down from the dais. When he reached her, he did not look at the nobles again. He looked only at her. With the same grave intensity, he had the night he bared his throat in the moonlight, when he said, "Run if you want, I will follow." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Let them hate," he said softly, loud enough for every wolf in the room to hear. "Let them call me traitor. I will still choose you." And he placed the ceremonial band around her wrist, the twisted iron circlet of the Blackridge Alpha Queen. The bond settled over her like ash. As the nobles were dismissed, their silence spoke more than any rebellion could. She could feel the loathing, the resentment, the fear rippling beneath every bowed head. But none dared act. Not with Everett Steele whispering so close. That night, Lysaria could not sleep. She stood alone at the tower window, high above the torches that dotted the outer walls like watchful eyes. Beyond the keep, the gray wilds stretched endlessly under a bruised sky. And above it all, looming and low, hung the blood moon. Its light painted her skin in shades of bone and rose. Something deep inside her stirred. Something that had slumbered beneath her ribcage since the night Malric bit her, since the flames licked her wrists in the altar room, since the chains began to sing. She pressed a hand to her chest. The ache wasn't pain. It was memory. Footsteps behind her. The scent of steel and frost. She turned before he spoke. Malric came to her without his crown, without his armor, just a man with the storm still clinging to him like a second skin. "You should be resting," he said. "I don't sleep well," she murmured, eyes on the moon. "Not lately." He came beside her, silent. His presence wrapped around her like a cloak. He smelled of cold stone, burnt pine, and something darker, war, perhaps. "I saw the way they looked at me," she said quietly. "So did I. I don't belong here." "No," he said, voice low and rough. "You don't. You never belonged anywhere you were forced to be. You were always meant to be here. With me." She turned toward him, and for a moment she saw something unguarded in him, something almost human. "You didn't have to make me queen," she whispered. "I would have stayed without it." "I know," he said. Then leaned down, his breath warm against her temple. "But you deserve to be seen. Not hidden behind me. Not reduced to a bond or a secret." He cupped her cheek, thumb brushing the corner of her mouth. "I am not a kind man, Lysaria," he murmured. "But I will never let them take you." Her throat burned. "And if they try?" His answer was a kiss, deep and consuming, not soft, not sweet, but fierce. As if claiming her again, not by ritual, but by will. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her against him. The fire in her veins flickered, answering him. But then a sound. Far off, too distant for human ears. But not for hers. The faintest rattle. Chains. She broke the kiss, gasping. "Did you hear that?" He stilled. "Hear what?" But the sound had stopped. She stepped back, pressing a hand to her temple. The ache had returned. This time, deeper. "What is it?" Malric asked. "I don't know. It's like," she trailed off, eyes drawn again to the moon. A flicker in the sky. A shadow across its surface, brief, but unmistakable. "Something is waking," she said. Malric's jaw tensed. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Whatever it is, it'll have to go through me." Her heart beat faster. That was the problem. Whatever it was already inside her. And it wasn't done waking yet. Chapter 17. The Pale Alpha's Dream. The night suffocated under a heavy hush, the kind that settled over Obsidian keep like the final breath before a storm. Somewhere high in the tower, beneath velvet curtains embroidered with the black sigils of ancient wolves, Lysaria stirred. Her breath caught before she understood why. It wasn't the chill, though the hearth had gone cold. Nor was it the howl that laced through the stones like a memory. It was the silence inside her mind, the part of her that usually hummed with life, with warmth, with the strange flicker of Malric's bond, gone dark. She opened her eyes, but the world she found wasn't her room. She stood barefoot in ash. The sky was the color of spoiled milk, bleeding red where the moon pulsed full and low. Cracked bones jutted from the earth like the ribs of some ancient beast, twisted toward the heavens in agony. A chain dragged through the dust behind her feet, though she wore none. A throne stood in the distance, built from vertebrae, crowned by horns. And bound to it, a figure. The pale Alpha. His hair was the color of sunless snow. His eyes, empty wells that reflected nothing. Chains wound around his arms, his legs, through his ribs and throat. Blood ran down from the corners of his mouth, thick and black like tar. His voice was a whisper carried on the wind. "Kill him," he said. "Kill the Wolf King, and you will be free." Her feet moved without her command. Each step forward tore the dust away from her skin like something alive. She trembled as she neared him. The pale Alpha's lips curled, not in a smile, but something like recognition. "You were born with rot in your blood, child. Not even love can burn it clean." Suddenly, a snarl ripped through the air. A second figure appeared. Solid. Familiar. Malric. Not in his armor, not crowned. Just Malric, bare-chested, panting, eyes wild with something more feral than rage. His mark flared on her skin, the bite at her neck searing like iron newly pulled from flame. "Get away from her," he growled. The dream trembled. Chains snapped toward Malric like vipers. He caught one with his arm, letting it wrap and tear through muscle, but he didn't falter. His other hand reached for her, fingers finding hers. "Lysaria," he whispered. "Don't listen to him." Blood ran from his nose. From his ears. His body flickered at the edges, like the dream was trying to erase him. "He doesn't belong here," the pale Alpha said, voice low and cold. "But neither do you. You think he'll save you." More chains shot forward. Malric roared, not like a man, but like something old and crowned by instinct. His mouth opened, and from it poured light. It met the blood moon's glare, clashing in the sky. Lysaria screamed. Her body ripped in two directions, toward him. Toward freedom. Toward pain. "I choose." The world shattered. She woke with a cry caught in her throat. Sweat soaked the silk sheets. Her heart slammed against her ribs like it wanted out. But her gaze locked immediately on the figure by her side. Malric knelt beside the bed, shoulders bare, his palms pressed against the floor like he'd only just crawled from battle. His eyes, those impossible, molten gold eyes, were bloodshot. "You," she whispered. "You came into my mind." He didn't speak. Couldn't, it seemed. His breathing was shallow, his jaw locked. Then he slumped, catching himself on the edge of the bed. Lysaria surged up, catching him before he hit the ground. His blood smeared across her arm. "Why would you do that?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why would you let it tear into you?" Malric turned his head, cheek brushing her thigh where her nightgown had ridden high. His voice rasped, barely human. "Because I couldn't lose you." Not to him. Not to anything. Outside the chamber, Everick stood unmoving, rigid as the black columns lining the hall. He'd heard the scream. He'd felt the surge of energy that crackled through the stones. But he hadn't moved. Not until the sound of sobbing, quiet, broken, reached his ears. Then his fists clenched, so tight the leather of his gloves creaked. He didn't enter. Couldn't. It wasn't his place. But his eyes burned like he had. Inside, Lysaria pressed Malric's head to her chest. "You're hurt," she said. "You shouldn't have come after me." "I'll always come after you," he said, and when he looked up, something fragile passed through his gaze. "Even if you kill me for it." She shook her head, eyes stinging. "I would never." "You will," he whispered, like it was truth he'd already accepted. "It's in the dreams. It's written in the blood." "No. But I won't regret it," he said. "I won't regret choosing you." She crushed her mouth to his. It wasn't a kiss born of softness or affection. It was desperation, blood and heat, and the promise of ruin. He groaned into her, the sound low, guttural. His hands curled around her waist, trembling with restraint. They didn't make love. They clung. And when she fell asleep again, tangled in his arms, the shadows in the corner of the room didn't leave. They only grew darker. At dawn, Everick still stood guard. His eyes red. His spine straight. His mouth sealed shut like a vow unspoken. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need to. He knew the weight of war when he saw it, especially the kind fought in dreams. But when the Wolf King stepped out, eyes hollowed, gait limping, and simply nodded once in Everick's direction, he didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty." Malric said nothing, only walked on. And Everic, faithful, silent, always watching, followed. Behind him, Lysaria stood at the window, the bite mark on her throat still glowing faintly red. And above, in the sky, the blood moon hadn't faded. It simply watched. Waiting. Chapter 18. Valmyra's Judgment. The cold in the obsidian keep did not come from the stone. It came from the silence. Lysaria stood in the grand hall, a place usually echoing with the howls of courtiers, warriors, and the shifting growl of politics. Now it was still, stifling, as if something ancient were holding its breath beneath the blackened stone. Then the silence cracked. A horn blew, not one of the keep. It screamed through the mountains like a blade, shrill and holy, cutting through the fog and shadows. The guards at the great doors barely turned before the wood shuddered. A second blow, then a third. "Hold!" Everic's voice boomed across the floor. He stood with sword drawn, silver etched into its blade. "Seal the entrances now." But it was too late. The doors exploded inward, shards of ironwood flung like daggers. In their wake came a wave of red-robed figures, faces obscured by hoods, their hands clutching torches that burned with blue flame. The air filled with chanting. Foreign syllables. Old. Sanctified. Violent. Lysaria flinched as the sound scraped against her bones, her mark searing on her shoulder like a brand freshly pressed to skin. By the decree of Valmyra the seer, flame-bearer of the sanctum, came a voice as smooth as satin over glass. The blasphemous harboring of the broken saint ends tonight. From the shattered doorway emerged the woman Lysaria had not seen in 3 years. Her robes were not red, they were bone white, edged with phoenix embroidery. Her silver hair hung like a veil over her shoulders, and her eyes glowed with pale authority. "Return her to us," Valmyra said, not to Malric, not to the room, but straight to Lysaria. "And you, Alpha King, may it find redemption for your kind." Malric didn't speak. Not at first. He stood from the throne with a calm that struck terror deeper than a scream. His crimson cloak slid from his shoulders like blood off a blade. Then he shifted. There was no ceremony, no snarl of warning, just the ripping of cloth and bone, the crack of changing joints, and the sudden presence of something enormous in the room, a white wolf taller than any man, with eyes like molten gold and fur like frost-stained moonlight. Lysaria had seen him in this form before, but never like this. Never without mercy. With one leap, Malric launched himself into the invaders. His claws met a robed throat, tearing it open with a spray of red across the obsidian floor. Chaos erupted. The flamebearers screamed prayers even as they pulled hidden blades and surged forward. Blue fire arced across the hall, but Malric was a storm. He tore through them with the precision of a creature born for death. One figure he slammed into a pillar so hard the stone cracked. Another he bit at the shoulder and flung across the room like a broken doll. Everic joined the fray. He moved with less fury, more control, parrying fire with his sword, his stance guarding Lysaria at all times. One torchbearer came too close. Everic drove his blade through the man's gut and kicked him back without blinking. "Stay behind me," he growled. But Lysaria couldn't move. Her legs refused. Her eyes were fixed on the woman who stood untouched in the center of carnage. Valmyra did not flinch as blood sprayed at her feet. She simply stepped over a fallen body and held out her hand to Lysaria. "You don't belong here, child," she said softly. "You were always meant for more than chains and fire." Her voice was so familiar. Like warm milk on winter nights. Like the lullabies before her first rites. Like the woman who taught her how to endure pain and call it faith. "You lied," Lysaria whispered. Her lips barely moved. Valmyra tilted her head. "We gave you purpose." Malric tore through another priest, his growl reverberating through the marble. But Valmyra raised her hand, and her followers dropped to their knees as one. A wall of holy fire blazed behind them, cutting the hall in two. "Come home, Lysaria," Valmira said, almost gently. "I forgive you." Lysaria took one shaky step forward. Everett's hand slammed down on her shoulder. His voice was ice. "Don't." She turned to him. His jaw was set in stone, eyes colder than the flames. Lysaria began. "She's the one who burned your sisters," he cut in, voice low and sharp. "You told me that. Or have you forgotten?" Her throat closed. Valmira's expression didn't change. "The weak perish. That is the will of the sanctum." Everett didn't flinch. "You'll die here." "Perhaps," Valmira said. "But the girl comes with me." "No." Malric's voice cracked through the hall like a god's fury. He was shifting back, blood dripping from his mouth. Wounded, but standing. Valmira narrowed her eyes at him. "Your line is an abomination. Even the moon turns her face from you." "I don't need the moon," he said, dragging his torn cloak over one shoulder. "I am the dark it hides from." She raised her hand. From behind her, 3 cloaked figures emerged. Taller than the rest. Eyes blindfolded. Blades like silver flame in their hands. Assassins. Everett stepped forward. "No," Malric rasped. "They're mine." He met them halfway. The fight was quieter than the first. No howls, no fire. Just the sound of steel clashing with claws. Malric fought like a dying star, burning everything he touched, even as he flickered. One stabbed him through the side. He didn't scream. He bit through the man's throat and kept going. Another left a deep gash across his back. A third went for his neck. Lysaria screamed. And the sound stopped everything. Valmira turned. Malric caught the assassin's wrist mid-strike and broke it. Bones split. Then the neck. Then the stillness. Blood trickled down his chin. His eyes found Lysaria's across the battlefield. She took a step toward him. But Valmira's hand snapped up again. The floor beneath them shuddered. Glyphs ignited around the chamber, runes of old fire and banishment. "It is done," Valmira whispered. A pulse of magic surged out. Lysaria fell to her knees, clutching her mark. It burned, searing through her shoulder like wildfire. She couldn't breathe. Malric staggered, bracing against a column, blood pouring freely. Valmira turned her back to them. "Fall back," she told her remaining followers. "They will not survive the night." With a flick of her fingers, the flames vanished. So did she. The room smelled of ash and blood. Lysaria crawled to Malric. He didn't meet her eyes. His breath rattled, one hand pressed to his ribs. "She won't have another chance," he murmured. "Not again." "Malric." "I told you," he rasped. "I will die by you. Not her." His blood stained her hands. And she didn't stop crying. Not even when Everett approached silently, his own shoulder bloodied, gaze shuddered but lingering on her. Not even when the torches dimmed. And not when the wolves began to howl outside. Chapter 19. The Blood of the Sun and Moon. The silence of the hidden infirmary was only broken by the soft clatter of vials and the rasp of shallow breathing. A dim lantern hung above, casting its pale orange glow across the obsidian walls and Lysaria's trembling hands. She sat atop a wide stone slab, sleeves rolled, eyes unfocused as the wolf healer examined the vial of blood drawn moments earlier. Malric stood just behind her, arms crossed, posture deceptively still. Only his flicking gaze, moving from her face to the physician's gloved hands, betrayed the tension humming through his frame. Everett leaned silently in the shadows, his expression unreadable, but one hand lingered at his hip, close to the hilt of his sword. The physician finally drew in a tight breath. "Alpha," he said softly, "it glows." Lysaria blinked, head snapping up. "What?" He held the vial forward. In the shifting light, the blood shimmered, not red, not wholly silver, but a strange molten glint, like sunlight caught in moonlight. It pulsed faintly. Alive. "It can't be," she whispered. "That's not normal." No, the physician said. It's not. Malric stepped forward, the weight of his presence pulling the room into focus. Speak plainly. The physician bowed his head. She carries both the solar and lunar bloodlines. Not mixed, merged. She is the container. The prophecy's vessel. Lysaria recoiled as if slapped. What prophecy? Everett's voice cut across the room, low and steady. The one the high orders have buried for centuries. The one the old wolves whisper when drunk on madness and memory. He stepped forward, eyes never leaving hers. You're the blood of the sun and moon. The bone wolf's bride. Lysaria stumbled from the table, backing away so fast her heel struck the edge of the stone bench. No, she breathed. No, that's not, I'm not. Lysaria. Malric's voice was deep, but softer than usual. He moved closer, but didn't touch her. This doesn't change. Doesn't change, she barked, a harsh, high laugh escaping her throat. You think this doesn't change anything? I'm not a person to them, I'm a key. A living lockpick for something ancient and monstrous. You're not. I'm not yours, Malric, she shouted, the words surprising even herself. Silence fell like ash. Everett flinched, just a fraction. Malric didn't move. His face, for a heartbeat, looked carved from ice. Then, slowly, he extended a hand. Come with me. She hesitated. He didn't push. Outside the infirmary, they walked through the fortress's cold arteries, past guards who bowed low and dared not speak. Into the heart of the obsidian keep, where stones swallowed sound and ancient secrets still breathed. The archive chamber was locked with 3 runes and Malric's blood. He pressed his palm to the carved symbol, murmured something in the old tongue, and the door slid open with a groan like thunder underwater. Everett lingered in the shadows behind them but didn't enter. Inside, the air was dry and smelled of parchment and the dust of forgotten things. Scrolls were stacked in spirals, tomes chained to pillars, and in the center of the room stood a pedestal. Malric lit the lamp. Everett passed him a bundle of scrolls, tied in red ribbon. Don't show her the rest, he said curtly. Just this. Malric didn't respond. He untied the ribbon and spread the scroll atop the pedestal. Lysaria leaned forward, every inch of her body taut as string. The parchment bore drawings, beasts and stars, a woman with 2 halos behind her head, one of fire and one of ice. She read the text aloud, voice cracking. When the wolves have lost their path, when sun and moon no longer rise apart, a girl shall be born with blood of both, to awaken the bone wolf and end the age of hunger. Lysaria stepped back, breath shallow. So I'm not even a person to the gods. I'm their final chess move. Malric watched her quietly. That's not all it says. She shook her head. I don't want to hear more. But he didn't stop. She must choose freedom or sacrifice. If she chooses love, the wolf will sleep. If she chooses power, the world will bleed. Lysaria closed her eyes. The tears came fast, hot, and silent. She felt her knees weaken, and suddenly Malric was there, arms wrapping around her before she could fall. Let me go, she said against his chest, though her hands clutched his tunic. No. You heard them. I'm just a prophecy. A bride for a ghost. You are not a ghost's bride, he said, voice like embers cracking in the hearth. You're the woman I chose. And I'll damn any god who tries to take you. She sobbed, harsh and raw. You don't understand. You've never been used like this. Owned like this. You were born with power. I was only ever given it to serve something else. Malric's hand slid to her nape, holding her still against him. Then I'll burn the purpose and keep only you. His scent surrounded her, warm fur, pine, blood, something darker. Her pulse slowed, tangled with his. She pressed her face to his chest and wept until her throat ached. After what felt like an hour, she pulled away, blinking through the tears. Malric. He met her gaze without flinching. If I'm a curse, she whispered, would you still hold me? He didn't hesitate. If the curse devoured the world, I would still hold you at its center." A silence settled. Outside the chamber, Everick leaned against the wall. His face was hidden by the shadow, but the light from the scroll room spilled over his hand, the one curled tightly around his blade. He did not move, only stood, as if waiting for the silence to break. But it never did. Chapter 20: Malric's Sacrifice. The wind howled across the gray-wild expanse, dragging dust and cold like ragged teeth. Beneath the bruised sky, the shattered bones of an ancient temple clawed toward the clouds, half buried in ash and time. The ground trembled. The scent of war was thick, blood, steel, old magic rising from the deep like smoke from a dying fire. Lysaria stood motionless on the ridge, her pale cloak snapping behind her. Below, banners of the sanctified flame rippled crimson in the breeze, their golden insignias catching the last light of the dying sun. And at the heart of it all, like a figure carved from the dusk itself, stood Malric. He faced the approaching host alone. "No," Lysaria whispered. Her voice caught on the wind. "He said he'd speak with them, not." He knew they would never listen, Everick murmured behind her. His voice was low, brittle with something he would not name. "They want your blood, Lysaria. They want the relic you carry inside you. And they think killing him will make you surrender." She turned to him, her eyes wide and shining. "We can go to them together. Tell them I'm not what they think." Everick shook his head. "They don't want the truth. They want a martyr." A distant roar echoed from the plain. Lysaria looked back. Malric was shifting. She didn't see the motion, only the aftermath. One moment, a man cloaked in black stood against an army. The next, a beast of ancient fury filled the horizon, silver-black fur bristling, his form massive, terrible, beautiful. His howl cracked the sky, rattled the bones of the earth. And then he charged. The sanctified ranks shattered like twigs under storm. Men screamed. Fire leapt from summoned sigils, but the wolf tore through them, heedless, his fangs wet with rage. The ground split beneath his paws. The wind turned red. Lysaria stumbled back, one hand pressed over her mouth. Her knees buckled, but Everick caught her before she fell. "You can't stop him," he said, his voice taut with pain. "He isn't fighting for peace anymore. He's fighting for you." She blinked, as if the words were too large to hold. Below, Malric clawed through a column of armored Templars, his flank scorched with firelight, blood streaming from his shoulder where a blessed blade had scored his flesh. But he did not slow. He moved like ruin, like retribution forged in sinew and bone. Until the sky turned red. A pulse ran through the air, cold and bright. Time stilled. From the heart of the opposing army, a golden object rose, suspended in unnatural stillness. It spun slowly, silently. The ancient relic. The heart of Saint Nevera. It glowed. Then it struck. The light seared across the battlefield like a blade of fire and divinity. It hit Malric square in the chest, and for a moment, Lysaria thought the world had gone silent. The wolf convulsed. The light pierced through fur and flesh, through heart and spine. He fell. No. Lysaria tore free of Everick's grip and ran. She didn't feel the thorns slicing her calves or the broken stones beneath her boots. She only saw the blood. So much blood. Dark and steaming in the cold air, pooling beneath his massive body as he lay in the dirt. "Malric," she dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands shook as she touched his fur, slick with sweat and gore. "Please no. Please don't do this." "You promised." The beast stirred. With a groan that sounded like mountains dying, Malric shifted back. Bone cracked, flesh folded, fur withdrew, until it was just him again. Broken and bleeding and far too still. But he opened his eyes. His voice was hoarse, raw. "Lysaria." She sobbed, clutching him to her chest. "Why? Why would you do this?" He gave a soft, pained laugh, one that barely rose above the rush of wind. "Because you're not theirs." "But you're dying," she whispered, shaking her head. I can feel it, Malric, His hand rose, trembled, found her cheek. Everic, he rasped, not looking away from her. Take her and run. Everic was there in an instant, blood on his own blade, a dark bruise blooming on his jaw. You can't hold them off alone. I'm not asking, Malric said, and for a moment, he sounded like the king he was. The wind carried screams and steel. More were coming. Dozens. Hundreds. Lysaria clung tighter. Don't leave me. Please, please don't. Malric's smile was faint but real. I never planned to live, little light. Not since the moment I touched you. She shook her head violently, tears falling onto his lips. That's not fair. You can't say that. You can't. I can, he breathed. Because I chose you. Not for prophecy. Not for power. Just you. Then he coughed. Blood coated his teeth. I'm the curse, she cried, voice raw. If I wasn't this. His thumb brushed her skin. Even if the curse devours me whole, he whispered, I'll still want you in my arms. She made a sound, half sob, half scream, and buried her face against his throat. Everic stepped forward. Lysaria. We have to move. She didn't move. The first arrow struck near their feet. The second buried itself in Malric's shoulder. He didn't flinch. Everic grabbed her. Now. Or he dies for nothing. Something shattered in her. She rose, slow and shaking, her fingers trailing across Malric's chest one last time. I'll come back, she said. I swear it. His eyes met hers. Burn them all, he said softly. For me. Everic pulled her into the shadows. Behind them, the blood moon climbed, vast and vengeful, into the sky. And somewhere deep in the ruins, something ancient woke to its name. Chapter 21. The Wolf Without a Heartbeat. The world had stopped breathing. Ash reigned over the broken horizon of the gray wastes, drifting like snow across blood-slicked soil. The remnants of banners, Velmyra's flame sigil, and the crescent fong of Malric's house fluttered limp on shattered spears. The wind groaned like a dying thing, carrying the scent of burnt fur, scorched stone, and the sharp, bitter tang of something more ancient than blood. Lysaria knelt in the ash, cradling Malric's body. His form had half reverted. The monstrous beauty of his wolf shape was collapsing by degrees, fangs dulling, claws retracting, silver-flecked fur pulling back into too pale skin. His chest was still. No rise. No fall. No, her voice broke, a jagged thing in the silence. No, please. Please. Everic crouched nearby, cloak shredded, blade dripping red. One hand hovered at his side, barely able to hold himself upright from where he'd fought through Velmyra's advancing line. His eyes were locked on Malric's corpse with something deeper than shock, something hollow. We need to go, Everic said, voice rough. They'll send more. Lysaria didn't move. Her trembling fingers cupped Malric's jaw, brushing his blood-matted hair away from his face. I can't feel his heartbeat, she whispered. I know. Everic looked away. No. You don't. You don't, he promised, A ragged gasp tore from her throat. She pressed her ear to Malric's chest. Silence. Not even the illusion of a flutter. The ancient medallion around his neck, once warm with his alpha pulse, was now cold, a lifeless piece of silver pressed between them. Her tears fell in streams, soaking the torn remnants of his tunic. She didn't care that she was kneeling in blood. That every breath was pain. That her bones screamed for rest. All she felt was absence. Lysaria, Everic said, tone sharpened now. If we stay. Don't touch me, she hissed, voice rising to a tremor. Don't tell me to leave him. Everic didn't flinch at her fury. He only stepped back, as if her pain scorched more than fire ever could. A distant howl broke the silence. Not wolf. Not human. A shriek of something divine. Lysaria's eyes widened. Her hands trembled against Malric's chest as heat sparked beneath her skin. Not flame, but lightning. A silver glow bled from her fingertips, staining his skin in celestial veins. Everick stiffened. "What are you doing?" "I don't know." Her voice shook. It won't stop." The glow pulsed. Her back arched and a scream burst from her lips, not pain, not fear. Something primal, holy, and broken. Light lanced from her spine like wings of molten silver, shattering the ground beneath her knees. Malric's body jerked once, then fell still again. "Come back," she begged. "You can't." From the ruined ridge, arrows whistled. Everick moved before thought could form. His blade flashed, cutting down the first assassin before the man's boots touched earth. Another charged from the smoke, bearing the sigil of the Saint Flame. Red robes. White eyes. A zealot's grin carved across his face. They'd been waiting. "Run!" Everick snarled. Lysaria refused to move. Two more came, blades coated in holy oil. Everick met them head-on, sword singing. He fought like a beast unleashed, all grace forgotten. He bled freely. But he didn't fall. "Get her out," one zealot screamed. "The Wolf King is down, take the girl." Lysaria curled protectively over Malric's body, refusing to let go. Her breath came in wild sobs. The world roared around her, screams, steel, snarls, and still she did not move. Then came the dagger. It flew from the shadows. A perfect arc. Straight for her throat. Time slowed. Everick saw it too late. But Lysaria did not flinch. Instead, her eyes blazed gold. She whispered a single word. "No." The dagger stopped mid-air, shivering. Then it exploded in light. The battlefield silenced. Even the zealots faltered. Everick turned, bloodied, panting, and saw her rise. She stood over Malric's still body, hair streaming like a banner of night. Her hands glowed, etched in lines of silver fire. Her eyes, once soft, now burned with the cold promise of something far older than justice. "You want the saint's bride," she said quietly. "You want the lamb for your pyres?" The wind stilled, listening. "Then come take me." The next pulse of power was not hers. It came from the body beneath her. A heartbeat. Barely there. But real. Everick froze. Lysaria fell to her knees again, breath catching. She touched his face. Another beat. Faint. Distant. But no longer absent. She let out a sob so soft it barely touched the ash around them. "You hear me?" she whispered. "You stubborn, cursed wolf, don't you dare die." His fingers didn't move. But the medallion around his throat shimmered once. A flicker. A promise. Everick approached, voice raw. "We have to move. Now." "They'll regroup." Lysaria looked down at Malric, then at Everick. Her hands clenched into fists. "Help me carry him." Everick hesitated, then bent, slipping one arm beneath Malric's shoulders. He winced as the Wolf King's blood soaked into his ruined armor. But he didn't complain. They moved together through smoke and ruin. Behind them, the zealots dared not follow. Not with the girl burning like a fallen god. Not with the whisper that the Wolf King's heart had stirred. Lysaria looked back only once. Ash swirled in the crimson light of the rising blood moon. Her voice cracked as she murmured into the night. "If you die, Malric, I will burn your saints. I will shatter your gods. I will tear this world apart." The oath sparked in the sky. And somewhere far beyond the veil, something ancient heard it. And howled. Chapter 22, Nyra's Bargain. The god blood had not yet dried on Lysaria's hands when the silence came. The ancient hall deep beneath the ruined temple moaned and shifted as if something long dead had turned in its sleep. Dust rained from the cracked arches. Vines strangled what few columns remained upright, and underfoot, faded sigils pulsed faintly, whispers of rites no mortal tongue remembered. The stale air was choked with copper, incense, and rot. Lysaria knelt beside Malric's motionless body, the stone floor beneath them soaked through with his blood. His skin had gone deathly pale, his chest still. Not even a twitch of fur or flare of his nostrils. Just the echo of what he had once been, a heartbeat silenced. "Don't do this," she whispered, hands pressing to his chest, as if her touch alone could restart what the world had taken from her. "You don't get to leave me. Not now." No answer. No warmth. No wolf. Only Everett's shadow, silent as ever behind her, one hand still loosely clutching a blood-stained blade, its curve catching the dim crimson glow of the distant blood pool. "He's not breathing," Lysaria said without turning. Everett did not speak. Didn't move. He was watching something, no, someone. From the far edge of the desecrated chamber, a figure limped into view. Pale as snow and trembling with every step, her ragged robes soaked from hem to collar in blood that was not her own. Naira Dusk. The ghost of what had once been a hunter. A girl. A priestess. A madwoman. Her smile was thin, crooked, almost sweet. "I heard the wolves cry," she murmured, voice barely louder than the rustle of dead leaves. "But I wasn't sure if it was for me or him." Lysaria stood, swaying slightly. "What are you doing here?" "I died," Naira said simply. "Or tried to. Many times." But she knelt beside Malric, her fingers not quite touching him. "He kept me alive long enough to regret everything." Everett tensed. Lysaria stepped between them, shielding Malric. "You were with Felmyra. You hunted him like prey." Naira chuckled, soft and brittle. "I hunted everything. Faith. Wolves. Myself." Then, her eyes met Lysaria's, gray irises burned through with sickly gold. "I failed," Naira said. "But you can still win." "What do you mean?" "I have a piece of him," she said, raising one blood-wet hand to her chest, where her heart beat far too fast, too wrong. "A shard of the first howl. The god who walked as a wolf. The old power. It kept me alive even when I wanted to rot." Lysaria shook her head. "Why would you give that to me?" "Because it's not mine anymore." Her voice trembled now, and her fingers clawed at her skin, leaving trails of blood down her sternum. "He's not my vengeance. Not my obsession. I wanted to hate him. But I couldn't. Not when he smiled. Not when he tried to save you." She looked up, laughing through her tears. "He's not your mate. He's your war." Before Lysaria could stop her, Naira plunged her hand into her own chest. The sound was wet and raw and final. A burst of silver light exploded from her wound, and with a scream that echoed across the forgotten temple, Naira's body arched backward, offering. Lysaria tried to run, but it was too late. The god's ard burst free like lightning unleashed, twisting midair in a spiral of sacred flame. It slammed into Lysaria's chest with a force that dropped her to her knees. Fire. Not the kind that burned flesh, but the kind that unmade the soul. She saw herself as a child cradled by wolves. Malric, broken and bleeding beneath a red moon. The old gods whispering in her bones, and Naira smiling with a mouthful of blood. Then blackness. She awoke in silence. Malric's body still lay beside her, but the blood no longer flowed. His chest no longer heaved. Yet something was different. Warm. Steady. A thrum, low and ancient. Lysaria pressed a hand to his heart. One beat. Then another. She gasped. He was alive. But not quite as he had been. His skin was still cold. His breath slow and shallow. But the wolf in him pulsed through her hand like a distant drumbeat. She turned. Naira's body lay crumpled and still. Her eyes were open, blank. But her lips wore a smile. "She gave it all," Lysaria whispered. Everett stepped forward, his blade sheathed now, face unreadable. "You burned," he said. "What?" "Your skin. Your hair. You glowed." She looked down. The white strands of her hair shimmered faintly, almost translucent. "I feel different. You're not human anymore." She blinked at him. "You say that like you mourn it." "I do." She expected mockery. Contempt. Anything but that soft ache in his voice. "She saved him," Lysaria said. "No." She saved you. Everett's voice hardened. You think she did it for Malric? He was never hers to save. She said he was her regret. Everett's jaw tightened, and he turned away. From the shadows near the broken wall, a soft wind stirred. The scent of burning incense drifted in again, but beneath it, Lysaria caught something else. Ash. Salt. Velmyra. Far away, but watching. Always watching. Lysaria turned her gaze toward the ceiling. The cracks there were bleeding light now red, pulsing. The blood moon was rising. The ritual was close. The wolves would come again. And this time, she would not weep. She would burn. She stood, wrapping her arms around Malric's barely conscious form. I won't let them take you, she whispered. Even if I have to become what they fear most. Everett watched her in silence. Then he said, barely audible, they already have. His gaze lingered not on Malric, but on Lysaria's hands, now etched with the same silver sigils that had once marked Nyra's wrists. Do you feel it? He asked. The god inside you? She did. Not as a voice, but as a hunger. A purpose. And in that moment, Lysaria knew. The world had not prepared for her. But it would remember her. Because Nyra's death had not just saved a heartbeat. It had awakened something far older. Something that would not die. Not until Velmyra's blood painted the temple walls. Not until every wolf howled her name. Not until the gods knelt. And still, even then, Lysaria might not stop. Chapter 23. The Blood Moon Rises. The sky cracked open like a wound. Lysaria felt it before she saw it, before the howl that tore through the world, before the light bled red across the heavens. It was in the way her blood turned heavy, thick as ash, each heartbeat a war drum. The moon, once pale and distant, now swelled with ominous hunger, its surface dripping crimson light like oil into fire. The blood moon had risen. She stood at the edge of the gray-wild battlefield, wind clawing at her silver-white robes, her arms still stained with the remnants of Nyra's final gift. Behind her, the temple ruins smoldered. Before her, the wolves howled in unison, not to one another, but to something older, something not yet present but already awake. Chains clanged in the distance. The bone altar trembled. They're answering the call, Everett said behind her. His voice was quiet, strained. Even the ferals. Even those who no longer remember what it means to kneel. Lysaria's fingers tightened around Malric's limp hand. He lay against the altar stone, breath shallow, his body half burnt from the ordeal he hadn't chosen. Nyra's sacrifice had sealed his wounds, but the cost was unbearable. The echo of her final words still clung to Lysaria's ears like frost. He is my regret. The wind shifted, and with it came the smell of sulfur and burning sanctity. Velmyra descended in light. Or what was left of it. Golden flames circled her robes like mourning veils, but her eyes were no longer the serene pools of High Priestess command. They were wide, deranged, mouth twisted with fury. In her hands, the twin spears of the sun oath flared, radiant and false, held as though righteousness still shielded her soul. You were meant to be an offering, she spat, stepping forward as the sky thundered. A vessel of curse, bled out beneath holy fire. Not this, mockery. Not this. She raised the spears. The light struck like divine lightning, pure flame that devoured shadow, turning sand to glass. Lysaria didn't move. The flames crashed upon her, and she raised her hand, not in fear, not in defiance, but in grief. The fire coiled around her fingers and dissolved. A ripple moved outward, shimmering, silent. The glass beneath her bare feet cracked and melted, not from heat, but from the weight of something vast within her. The sky gasped. The spears in Velmyra's hands shrieked. And broke. With a sound like the world weeping, the twin relics split down their golden spines and scattered into ash. Velmyra stumbled back, choking on disbelief. No, she whispered. You are not meant for this. You are not divine. You are not. The wolves began to kneel. It was not ceremony. It was instinct. All around the battlefield, the shifters, pack-bound and wild-blooded alike, collapsed onto their forelimbs. Heads bowed. For bristling. Even the generals of old, scar-marked and fierce, dropped to the ground, as if the earth itself commanded them to submit. Lysaria's body pulsed with light. The silver strands of her hair had turned white, glowing under the blood moon. Her eyes were no longer wholly human. They shimmered with flecks of gold and ink, like starlight drowning in an ocean. She looked at Valmyra. "I was never your offering," she said softly. Valmyra bared her teeth. "No, you're worse." She turned, staggered into the smoke. Her voice rose, cracked and trembling. "You think they kneel in worship, but they kneel to chains. You're no savior, Lysaria. Just a prettier curse." With that, she vanished into the storm. Lysaria turned to Malric. His pulse still fluttered faintly. Skin pale, brow furrowed even in sleep. The lines of his face seemed both regal and boyish now, less the feared Alpha, more the one who had once whispered apologies into her neck, half afraid she wouldn't believe them. She bent low, lifting him into her arms. The wolves remained bowed. Everic stepped forward, his sword sheathed, dark cloak pulled tight against the moon's bloody glare. His expression was unreadable, neither reverent nor cold, but something aching in between. "He can't die," Lysaria said, her voice hoarse from everything unspoken. Everic looked at her, at the light crackling around her, at the wolf blood crest now pulsing across her collarbone like a living rune. "You know what that means," he murmured. Silence stretched between them. Not empty, but pregnant with 1,000 years of ruin and memory. The kind of silence that comes only before the end, or the beginning of something older. A growl rumbled through the ground. Low. Endless. The bone altar shattered. From deep within the earth, the chains snapped, not one by one, but all at once, like the cords of fate themselves had been severed. Red mist poured from the fissures. The howls of wolves became screams. Lysaria's knees nearly buckled as the sound burrowed into her ribs. Everic stepped between her and the altar, drawing his blade again, though it trembled. Then the voice came. Not her. The words were not spoken, they were etched into the marrow, into stone and sky. Even the blood moon dimmed in response. "She is not mine to claim." Lysaria clutched Malric closer, shielding him instinctively. "But he is." A claw the size of a tree trunk burst from the altar's pit, slamming into the ground. The wolves scattered. Everic raised his sword and whispered something that could have been a prayer or a farewell. Lysaria didn't run. She looked into the mouth of the abyss, into the vast, ancient eyes that blinked open within the deep. And for the first time, she understood what Naira had meant. This was not a war for thrones or bloodlines. This was a reckoning. Chapter 24, The Pale Alpha Awakens. The silence after the blood moon was deafening. Lysaria stood at the edge of the bone altar's chasm, the world around her draped in a dim, carnivorous glow. The blood-red sky had darkened to bruised crimson, the stars themselves flickering like dying embers. She could still hear the echo of howls from the wolf legions far behind her, still feel the strange heat in her bones, the weight of their submission, their worship, their fear. But it was fading, and something deeper was calling. She blinked, and the altar stones beneath her dissolved into mist. The world tilted. The jagged edge of reality unraveled. Then she was falling. The dream hit her like cold iron. Not soft or strange, but true. Her breath hitched in her chest as her boots struck the ash-covered stone of some ancient place. No stars overhead. Only a vast ceiling of bone, roots curling like black veins. She turned, breathless, confused. A shadow rose before her. It wasn't shaped like a man, nor a beast. It was both and neither, long-limbed, crowned with twisted antlers of pale ivory, eyes like moonless ice. The pale Alpha. The god wolf who had slept for centuries beneath the altar, whispering through bloodlines, waiting for a vessel. You came to me, he said, voice like cracked marble, slow and deep and wet with something old. No, Lysaria whispered, taking a step back. I didn't summon you. You did, he said, his smile a slow stretch of skin over jawbone. The moment you bled beneath the blood moon. The moment you rejected her fire and embraced what runs in your true veins. Chains stirred around her ankles. She looked down. Blood-black links snaked along the stone floor, slithering like living things, reaching toward her and coiling over her feet. Panic surged in her throat. I'm not yours, she hissed. But he only chuckled. You always were. The witch blood was a veil. I see through it now. I see you. My bride. My equal. You were never meant to be bound to a half-formed prince. He is a cage. I am your shape. Behind him, the air twisted, and she saw him. Malric. Or a dreamlike projection of him, hanging from spectral chains, shirt torn, his body bruised and bloodied and gasping, head slumped. No, Lysaria surged forward, but the chains at her feet yanked her down. Her knees hit stone. The pale Alpha circled her like smoke. One choice, little flame. One cut. One death. And you're free. You and I, our power will split the sky. In the dream, she felt the weight of a blade appear in her hand. Pale silver. The hilt was made of antler bone. Her hands trembled. One cut, and this would end. She looked at Malric again, how pale he looked, how quiet. Like all his rage and command had been swallowed. As though the soul of him had already begun to drift. The pale Alpha knelt behind her, his breath brushing her ear like frost. You want freedom. Not chains. You want power. And he will never let you have it. Lysaria closed her eyes. Her grip tightened on the blade. Do it, the voice said. But beneath it, something else stirred. A different voice. A memory. I trust you to burn the world if it means saving it. Malric's voice. Not in command. Not in fury. But in belief. The blade fell from her fingers with a clatter. I would rather burn with him than rule with you, she whispered. The pale Alpha stilled. The chains cracked. You disappoint me, he said, no longer smiling. You choose weakness. I choose love. Something ripped in the dream world. Chains shattered. The stone beneath her split. The pale Alpha roared, a sound like the world's bones breaking in half. Lysaria felt her body pulled backward, out of the dream, out of the cavern of shadows, out of the weight of his hunger. She woke up screaming. Her body jerked against the altar stone, gasping, sweat and cold clinging to her skin. The sky above was darker now, moonless, as though the blood moon had imploded. And beside her, Malric lay limp, skin ghost white. Malric! Her voice broke as she scrambled to him. His pulse was thready. Too weak. Too cold. He can't die. He can't. Everic. Her voice carried through the altar winds, and he was already there. Everic stood at the edge of the platform, silver blade drawn, hair wild with ash and blood. His cloak was shredded, and dark streaks ran down one side of his jaw. Behind him, the shadows writhed, wolf-shaped things, pale-eyed and endless. The wolves of the pale Alpha. They had come the moment she'd screamed. He turned, eyes locking with hers. The cold detachment was gone. You saw him, he said. Didn't you? She nodded, cradling Malric's head against her lap. He's waking, she whispered. He wants me to be his. He wanted me to kill him. Her voice broke. I didn't. Everic's eyes flicked to Malric. Something there twisted. Not jealousy. Something darker. Something older. You should have, he said softly. She froze. Then saw the blood on Everic's sleeve. The tremble in his wrist. The trembling wasn't fear. It was restraint. You want him dead, she said slowly. Everic's joy tightened. He turned back to the edge, raising his sword again as the shadows crept closer. I want peace. But Lysaria was already rising, fury pulsing behind her eyes. Her voice cracked like a whip. He can't die. Everick looked back, cold fury dancing across his pale face. You know what it means if he lives. You felt it. He's the last tether holding that thing beneath the stone. If the pale Alpha awakens fully. He already has, she said. And Malric is the only reason I came back. Everick flinched. And then, softly, as if it hurt him to admit, you know what this means, don't you? Lysaria didn't answer. She just turned back toward Malric and lowered her forehead to his. I do. Above them, the sky cracked. A noise like mountains breaking filled the air. The altar shook beneath their feet. The shadows behind Everick hissed, then howled in unison. And from the deepest part of the chasm, a voice, not dream, but real, rose up like stone grinding against bone. She is mine. Everick turned toward the pit. His hands were shaking. Lysaria rose slowly, her back to the howl, her body trembling, one hand still gripping Malric's limp fingers. The pale Alpha had awakened. But she would not kneel. Chapter 25, The Bite That Breaks. Darkness bled through the fabric of the world. Lysaria was falling again, except this time, she did not flail or scream. The wind howled past her ears, but there was no cold, no terror. Only fury. Below, the chasm yawned wide, its maw aglow with the bone-laced sigils of the pale Alpha's dominion. The dream had returned. But she was not the same girl who had first tumbled helplessly into it. She struck the dream-soaked ground with a thunderous impact, knees cracking stone. The sky above swirled red and silver, a mimicry of the bone moon's eclipse. He was waiting. The pale Alpha emerged from the blackstone arch, bare-chested, ageless, crowned in antlers of bleached ivory. The snows obeyed his will here, rising in slow spirals, forming clawed silhouettes that hovered like loyal hounds. My bride returns, he murmured, eyes glowing like hollow moons. The one who survived every bond but mine. Lysaria rose to her feet, ignoring the weight pressing on her chest. I was never yours. The pale Alpha smiled, tragic and obscene. But you are. You bore the mark of one Alpha, then another, and still you stand. That is not mortal strength. It is mine. You are mine. He reached for her. Fingers, too pale, too long. The sky pulsed red. His touch neared her cheek. She shifted. The crack of bone, the rush of fur and heat and howl, she let it all loose. She didn't hold back. She didn't tremble. A great silver wolf exploded from her skin, eyes wild with flame, fangs bared in a snarl that echoed across dream and waking alike. The pale Alpha recoiled, but only for a breath. Then he laughed. You think this changes anything? He boomed, shedding his human form. Shadows curled around him, devouring his limbs, until he too became a wolf, but not of this world. His body twisted into something wrong, skin stitched with runes, eyes burning with cursed fire. He dwarfed her by twice, and every paw print he left behind scorched the snow into blood. She lunged. The fight was chaos and carnality, ancient magic ripping through every clash of fang and claw. He bit her shoulder, she tore open his flank. He pinned her down, she slammed her skull into his jaw until it cracked. The dream warped with every impact, shifting from the bone altar to the moonlit cliffs of their first encounter, to the darkened halls of Ashenfold where it had all begun. Reality bled in. Everick screamed as the altar cracked. The ground split beneath his boots, forcing him to drag Malric's unconscious body away from the rupturing stone. Shadows tore through the fissures, serpentine wolves with eyeless faces, shrieking in a tongue that smelled of rot. His blade flickered blue with enchanted edge, carving them down one by one, but more poured from the dark. His heart beat like a war drum. Not out of fear. Out of grief. Behind him, Malric's body jerked violently. Frost rippled over his skin, the final death throes of the curse trying to consume him fully. Not yet, Everick snarled through his teeth, slicing a beast in two. You don't die yet. Not before you see what she gave for you. Another wolf leapt, jaws wide. Everick twisted, but too late. Its teeth sank into his shoulder. He grunted, then drove his dagger up through its chin, staining himself in its vile ichor. Blood poured down his chest. He barely felt it. Behind him, the bone moon cracked. In the dream, Lysaria heard it, the echo of a soul trying to return. "Malric," she breathed. She couldn't see him, but she felt him now. Felt his pain, his fading warmth, the edges of his tether shredding. The pale Alpha pounced. His monstrous jaws clamped around her throat. He whispered into her bones, "Kill him. Kill the second Alpha. Be free." Her blood surged. "No." The word reverberated not from her mouth, but from her very soul. She gathered her legs and bit back. Her jaws closed around the pale Alpha's neck, but it was no mere bite. It was the claim of one spirit upon another, the burning mark of a bond not imposed but chosen. Silver light flooded the dream, pushing back the red. Her mark flared, once, twice, then broke into pieces. At the altar, Malric's eyes flew open. Lysaria's third mark burst into being, carving a symbol of silver fire across his chest as he gasped. The dream began to collapse. The pale Alpha screamed, not in rage, but in loss. His body cracked, his ribs splintering outward as the power anchoring him dissolved. Curse fire erupted from his gut, clawing outward, seeking a new host, but there was nowhere to go. Nowhere but her. Lysaria stood amidst the ruins of the dreamscape, panting, bloodied, fur in tatters. And when the pale Alpha shattered into ash, his power streamed into her, flooding her veins with ancient sorrow. She didn't fight it. She took it in. And bore it. Reality returned with a thunderous silence. Lysaria collapsed onto the cracked altar stone, her human form restored, body trembling. The bone moon above shattered into silver mist, raining down like falling stars. Her skin glowed faintly from within. Her hands shook. Footsteps. Rushing. Then, "Lysaria, Lysaria, no." Malric's voice. She felt his arms scoop her up, cradle her like something precious and broken. "Why is it you?" he whispered, forehead pressed to hers. "Why you, always you? Why must you bleed to save me?" She opened her eyes. "Barely. I would do it again," she murmured. A tear slid down his cheek. She raised a trembling hand to wipe it. "Because I love you." And then her breath stilled. The world held its breath with her. Above, the bone moon vanished. And the first dawn in 1,000 years crested the horizon. Chapter 26, Ashes of a Kingdom. The silence was unnatural. It fell upon the battlefield like snowfall, soft and soundless, but smothering. No more howls. No more screams. The blood moon, shattered in Lysaria's final bite, had rained its crimson light upon the world and then dissolved into a cascade of silver embers that still shimmered in the air like a prayer answered too late. Malric knelt in the ruins of the bone altar, his arms cradling her limp form. Lysaria's skin shimmered faintly, veins etched with silver like molten threads beneath the surface. Her eyes were shut, lashes wet with fever-slicked tears, and her body trembled with each breath, as if the very act of living was now a defiance against something too vast to name. He whispered her name over and over, as if by repeating it, he could undo the wound in the world. Undo the moment her teeth had pierced his skin, her final, desperate act to sever the curse. "You foolish, beautiful wolf," Malric murmured, voice raw. "You didn't have to." But her lips parted, the ghost of a smile tracing them. "I did." He lowered his brow to hers, his whole frame quaking. Around them, the earth groaned and settled. The altar cracked in spiraling lines, its blood-soaked stone losing color, turning gray, then to ash. Above, the sky, once eternally stained crimson, brightened at last. The first star of night blinked through a sky no longer veiled in divine rage. For the first time in centuries, the world breathed. Yet Malric did not rejoice. His kingdom, what was left of it, was in ruins. The armies were scattered, the ancient wolves broken. And Lysaria, his Lysaria, was barely alive, pulsing with a power too immense, too wrong. She should not have survived the mark. And yet she had. From the edge of the sundered canyon, Everic stood, blood trailing down one arm. His sword, soaked red, hung low in his grip. His eyes were fixed not on Malric, not on the sky, but on Lysaria. Unmoving, unblinking. Behind him, the last of the long-dead soldiers smoldered into dust. He had not blinked since the moment the pale Alpha died screaming in flame and silver light. Something inside him had fractured, cleanly, silently. But not visibly. They returned to Obsidian Keep in silence. It was not a march of victory. It was an exodus of survivors. The halls of the keep, once black stone veined with molten light, now stood hollow and dark. Wolves limped or were carried in. Few elders remained. No healers sang. No horns called the dawn. The very air felt scorched, as if Valmyra's prophecies had been carved into the walls with fire, now nothing but smoke curling through the broken rafters. Lysaria awoke 3 days later. When she opened her eyes, silver light burst like a heartbeat, rattling the chamber walls. Everic, seated in silence beside the door, flinched for the first time in hours. "You should rest," he said, not looking at her. She did not answer at first. Her gaze wandered the chamber, the blackened stone, the torn draperies, the cinders curled in the fireplace. Her fingers flexed. The silver inside her had grown quieter, but not still. She finally spoke. "Where's Malric?" "Alive," Everic said, after a pause. "He hasn't left the war chamber." She pushed herself up, wincing. "And Valmyra?" Everic's hand tightened on his knee. "Still breathing. For now." Lysaria rose, barefoot and slow, the stone floor cold against her skin. She felt strange in her body, light, unmoored. As though she had died and only some version of her had returned. She followed the trail of scorched air through the empty halls, to where Valmyra waited. The priestess was not shackled. She knelt at the edge of the old flame pit beneath the keep's crypt vaults. Around her, her surviving acolytes, no more than 3, stood with cracked eyes and burned robes. Valmyra's once imposing figure was reduced to brittle bone and madness, hair hanging in clots, lips split from salt and blood. But her voice was steady. "I knew you'd come," she rasped. "Silver girl. False savior." Lysaria didn't speak. Valmyra's eyes gleamed. "They think you've won. But you've only inherited the debt. You severed the bond, yes. Killed the vessel. But the power, the source, it didn't die. It changed hands. You are not free, Lysaria." "I know," Lysaria said quietly. That stopped her. The priestess blinked. "You know? I felt it the moment he died. The moment the bond broke. The curse needed an anchor. It chose me." She stepped forward. "But I choose what to do with it." Valmyra laughed, a dry, breaking sound. "Then burn with it." The flame pit roared to life. Lysaria didn't move. Silver light spilled from her skin, searing through the chamber in a breathless flare. The acolytes screamed, brief, sharp, and collapsed into soot. Valmyra's mouth opened in a wordless cry, face illuminated by a light she could not comprehend. The fire twisted, shrank, and turned cold. Lysaria knelt before her, pressing a palm to her chest. "You once said I was nothing," she whispered. "But I was always the key." The fire roared again, this time silver, not gold. Valmyra's last breath curled out as steam. Her body crumbled to ash, blown by a wind that came from nowhere. Lysaria rose. She did not cry. In the silence that followed, Malric appeared in the threshold. He said nothing at first, just looked at her, eyes raw and wide, as though seeing a ghost that bled light. She turned to him slowly. "She said I've become the curse." "You haven't," he said, stepping forward. "You're what broke it." She tilted her head. "Then why does it still feel like it's inside me?" "Because it is. But it obeys you now. It's not a leash anymore. She looked down at her own hands, flexing them. "I'm not a goddess," she said. "No, you're something rarer." He stepped close, cupped her face. "You're mine." Her breath caught. "Even now?" "Especially now." She pressed her forehead to his. Her fingers, so cold and luminous, gripped his tunic as if the world might shift again. "I'm so tired, Malric." "I know." From the shadows, Everic watched. The sword in his hand trembled, blood still drying along its hilt. He did not speak, did not move. Only his eyes betrayed him. They burned with something not yet said, not yet done. Chapter 27, Everic's Last Stand. The blood moon had shattered, but its residue clung to the sky like a curse unwilling to die. The fortress of obsidian keep lay blanketed under a veil of crimson mist, its high spires dark against the glow of dying embers. Silence reigned, the kind born not of peace, but of exhaustion. The kind that comes after the world has screamed itself hoarse. But war, like rot, never dies cleanly. Lysaria heard the clash before she saw the fire. It started as a low rumble, an echo sliding through the northern corridor like a ghost unsure of its shape. Then the unmistakable ring of steel against steel, sharp and final. She turned her head slowly, gaze narrowing. The night had brought with it something more than exhaustion. It had brought survivors. "North Gate," she whispered, the words coiling in her throat. Malric, lying pale and unconscious on the stone cot beside her, stirred faintly in the haze of fever. Still wrapped in layers of blood-stained linen, still breathing only because the curse had been broken. But not well enough to rise. Another crash. Shouts. Then, Everic. He moved like a shadow through the burning walkway beyond the north gate, a silhouette etched in fury. His sword gleamed under the torches, already soaked in blood. The first wave of the attackers, survivors of the shattered God Guard, deserters of Velmyra's failed creed, had fallen swiftly. But the second came like rats after flood, fangs bared, knives hungry. Everic said nothing. He never did. But his blade spoke volumes. The clang of iron rang like thunder. He ducked beneath a spear, drove his elbow into a throat, spun. Steel whistled, one man's scream cut short. Another lunged, only to find Everic's boot crushing his knee, his blade raking clean through ribs. There was no poetry in his fight. Only precision. Only silence. And something else. His face was calm. Too calm. As if he had been waiting for this. As if he had known it would end this way. "Pull back," one of the rebels screamed. "He's just one man." Everic didn't give them the chance. He pressed forward with terrifying control, eyes like glacier glass. Blood sprayed across the stone, sticky and hot, catching on his jawline. He didn't flinch. The dead fell at his feet. The living fled in pieces. But his left shoulder sagged. A slash across his ribs slowed his breath. The wound on his thigh would not stop weeping. Still, he stood. Still, he moved. And then, just silence again. The corridor choked on bodies. Smoke billowed from broken braziers. A single torch clattered against the stone and flickered out. Everic exhaled. Behind him, a footstep. Not an enemy. Lysaria. She came barefoot, cloaked in shadow, breath ragged. Her fingers trembled as she reached him. She looked at the blood pooling beneath his boots, the trail he had carved, the steel shaking in his hand. "You weren't supposed to fight," she said, voice breaking like brittle glass. His lips tilted into something almost like a smile. "Wasn't I?" She tried to catch him as he stumbled, but he was too tall, too heavy. They sank together onto the stone floor, her arms tight around him, his weight sagging into her chest. "Malric," she whispered. "He's alive. He's safe. You did it." Everic's eyes fluttered, lashes wet. "Good." She cradled his jaw. Her palms were slick with blood, his, not hers. "Everic, don't go. Please. You can rest now. You can live." "I was already resting," he murmured. "Every day I stood behind him. That was enough." Her tears streaked silently down her cheeks. Everett's eyes found hers, not clouded, but luminous. "Tell him," he said, voice thin as thread, "I never left his side." "Not once." She nodded fiercely, unable to speak. His gaze drifted to the burning archway. "He never saw me." "He did," she said, almost choking. "He just couldn't bear to look." Everett laughed, or tried to. It came out broken. "Sounds like him." The last breath left him quietly, not as a gasp, but a release. A kind of exhale a man gives when he knows he has done all he could. Lysaria held him long after his body had gone still, forehead pressed to his temple, his blood seeping into her skin. She didn't move when Malric arrived. The prince's steps were uneven, breath ragged. His tunic was still damp from fever sweat, one hand braced on the wall, but he came anyway, driven by something colder than duty. His eyes fell on Everett's body, then on Lysaria. He didn't speak at first. He only walked forward, past the bodies, past the smoke. He crouched beside Everett and reached out a shaking hand. It hovered there, then rested lightly on Everett's chest. "Brother," he said quietly. His voice didn't crack. His jaw didn't tremble. Only his fingers did, trembling like a boy trying not to break. "I should have known," he said, softer now. "You were always there." Lysaria bowed her head. "I try to forget you," Malric whispered. "Because I thought, if I let myself remember, I'd never forgive myself." He looked up at her. "Did he ever say?" "No," she said gently. "He didn't need to." Malric nodded, then bent forward, pressing his forehead against Everett's. "You fool," he said, barely audible. "You stupid, loyal fool." The torchlight caught the glint of a tear sliding down his cheek. Far above, the blood moon's last echo faded from the sky. In its place, silver starlight broke free, cold and clear. Lysaria stood slowly, watching the man who had been their shield, their shadow, their silence. She laid a kiss on Everett's brow, then turned away with trembling breath. "I'll carry this," Malric said behind her. "Always." She didn't answer. The stone corridor felt endless as she walked, each step pulling her further from the boy who had guarded their fate with nothing but quiet devotion. And as the blood dried on her hands, she wondered if any kingdom, any salvation, was worth this price. Chapter 28. The Sun Over Wolves. The dawn broke not with a whisper but a roar. For the first time in centuries, sunlight spilled across the high cliffs of Obsidian Keep, melting the black frost that had long coated the stone like a curse. Rays of light pierced through the mist-shrouded peaks, pouring into the forgotten valleys where wolf blood once thrived freely. The ancient keep, always cold, always shadowed, now stood bathed in gold and fire, an impossible promise made real. From every terrace, tower, and watch post, the wolves began to howl. It was not a cry of war. It was not pain. It was something older. A song passed down through blood and marrow, now freed from the burden of silence. Their voices rose in harmony, throaty, sharp, keening, and spread through the valley like wildfire, carried by the wind that no longer smelled of rot and iron, but pine, fresh earth, and the living sun. Lysaria stood on the rooftop of the highest tower, her long braid brushing her spine, her gown catching the wind like a silver sail. The light touched her skin gently, reverently, as though it recognized her, as though it had waited all this time for her to step into its arms. She didn't flinch, though her chest felt hollow. Below her, the courtyard brimmed with movement, survivors of the final battle cleaning weapons, wrapping wounds, whispering to the dead with quiet reverence. Children, wide-eyed and wild-haired, peeked from behind walls and columns, seeing the world painted in gold for the first time. A wolf ran across the stone steps, silver-furred and majestic, then stopped to look up at her. Its eyes were the same eerie green as Everett's had been. She turned away, breath-catching. The light didn't burn her, but it changed her. Every day since the curse broke, she had felt it, under her skin, in her bones. Something inside her no longer belonged to this earth. It pulsed differently. breathed differently. The sun did not warm her, it stirred her like a god waking from slumber. Behind her, heavy footsteps slowed at the threshold. "Malric," she said without turning. He came up beside her, his shadow long and strong in the morning light. He no longer wore the Black Wolf's armor. Today, he was dressed simply, in worn leather and linen the color of ash and bone. His face, usually carved from stone, was soft with awe. "They're still howling," he said. She nodded. "They'll howl for days. Maybe years. They've earned it." He didn't speak again, only reached out his hand. She took it. His grip was calloused, warm, human. But as he pulled her gently toward the edge of the battlement, his fingers threaded with hers, it felt like more than touch, it was memory. Hers, Everett's. The war. The fire. The vow she'd never spoken aloud. "You're not trembling anymore," he said, glancing down at their joined hands. "I think I'm done being afraid." He looked at her then, and something cracked open in his eyes. "Then I can finally be afraid." She wanted to laugh, but her throat was tight. You've never feared anything." "I do now." His voice was low, rough. "Every day you step into the sun, I watch a little more of you drift away." She shook her head slowly. "No, I'm not drifting. I'm transforming. I feel it. The old powers, they didn't leave. They settled. And they're reshaping me." He stared at her, then reached out and cupped her face. "Then let me hold you while I still can." His mouth brushed hers, soft at first, then insistent, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. The kiss deepened with quiet desperation, sunlight gilding their hair, their skin, their shadows that stretched together over the ancient stones. In that moment, they looked like figures from a legend, silver and gold, wolf and flame, lips tangled in a love too late and too true. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "There's something I've been meaning to say," she whispered. "Before it's too late." "No," he smiled faintly. "Don't say goodbye. Not today." "I wasn't." Her voice shook. "I was going to say thank you." His brow furrowed. "For what?" "For choosing me. Even when it ruined everything you were supposed to be." Malric exhaled slowly, as if letting go of a weight he'd carried too long. "It didn't ruin anything. It revealed it." They stood there a while, listening to the howls that had turned to choruses, the wind weaving through broken towers like song. When the silence returned, it was not empty, it was reverent. Later, they walked the length of the battlement together, hand in hand, past the scattered flower offerings and the scuffed bloodstains not yet scrubbed away. Lysaria slowed as they reached the northern wall. A patch of stone had been scrubbed clean. A single wolf-shaped token had been left beside it. Everett's watchpost. She knelt, fingers brushing the cold ground. "He saved you," she murmured. Malric's gaze did not leave the place where his brother had fallen. He always did. They stood in silence until Lysaria lifted her hand toward the rising sun. The light kissed her skin again, but this time it lingered longer. The air shimmered faintly around her palm, a corona of light bending unnaturally. "Malric," she said, quietly. He turned to her. She stared at her hand, flexing her fingers as the light moved through her, not on her. Her voice was barely audible. "I don't know how long I can stay." He didn't hesitate. He stepped close, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his forehead against hers. "You'll stay," he said. "Even if your body leaves, you'll stay. Here." He touched her chest. "And here." He kissed her temple. She closed her eyes. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "Just sad." "I'll carry the sadness," he replied. "I'm used to heavy things." She laughed through the tears welling in her lashes. The wind brushed her hair back, and in that instant, golden strands shimmered at the edges, as if the sun had begun claiming her for its own. When she opened her eyes, she looked out at the wolves gathering in the valley below, forming a spiral, their heads all turned upward toward the keep. Lysaria squeezed his hand. "They're waiting. For what? For whatever comes next. Malric looked down at her, kissed the corner of her mouth, and whispered, "Then let it be us." The wind howled again, this time not with mourning, but with hope. Chapter 29. The Curse Beneath Her Name. The night was too still. No wind stirred the high ramparts of Obsidian Keep. The stars blinked overhead like witnesses unwilling to look too long upon the ruin below. Within the ruins of the Bone Moon altar, where once ancient rites whispered through stone and blood, silence reigned, but not within her. Lysaria knelt upon the cracked obsidian, her silver hair spilling around her shoulders like fallen light. Except now it wasn't silver. Not entirely. At the ends, where her hair brushed the soot-stained floor, it darkened into a slow, smoldering red, like fire choked by ash. She hadn't dyed it. She hadn't touched it. It had changed on its own. "Stop," she whispered to no one. Her breath misted in the air, though no cold lingered. Her hands trembled in her lap. She had not moved in hours, and still her body throbbed with something primal, something foreign. Inside her, a voice like rusted iron spoke in a language she shouldn't know. "You were always meant to take my place." "No," she whispered. "I'm not a vessel. I'm not." The ground beneath her pulsed faintly. Malric was close. She could feel his presence like gravity, grounding her even when everything else frayed apart. He had followed her here, though she had begged him not to. She had walked barefoot across broken ground, leaving behind blood and silence, but he always followed. And now she feared he had followed her to her end. The shadows lengthened. She didn't hear him enter, but she felt it the moment his boots touched the sacred stones. "Lysaria." His voice broke around her name. She didn't look up. "You shouldn't have come," she said. Her voice was different too. Lower, threaded with something not her own. Something older. "He came anyway." "Of course he did." Malric knelt before her, arms trembling slightly as he reached for her hands. He took them without waiting, even when she flinched. "You're burning," he murmured, running his thumb over her skin. "Your veins." "I know." Her eyes lifted at last. Pale, once clear blue, now tinged with silver rings and flickers of red. "He's awake. The thing that was bound under my name. The thing sealed in the blood of my ancestors. It wants out." Malric swallowed hard. "Then let it try. Let it try to take you." Her smile was brittle. "It already has. He says I will be his rebirth. That my body will become the vessel through which he returns." Malric's grip tightened. He leaned in, forehead resting against hers, and for a moment the world stopped shaking. "Then I'll burn with you," he said. "You think I'll let you go through this alone? I'm not the girl you loved anymore." He shook his head, a tear sliding down his cheek. "You've never stopped being her. Not to me." His mark, his alpha's bite, flared against her shoulder. The bond throbbed between them, snapping and straining under divine pressure. "Break it," the ancient voice snarled. "Break the bond. You don't belong to a wolf. You are the moon that commands them." "I feel him inside me," Lysaria whispered, clutching Malric's wrists. "He wants to swallow me whole. But you keep pulling me back." Malric closed his eyes, his lips brushing her temple. "Then let me be your anchor. Let me be the weight that keeps you human." She gasped. Pain shot down her spine, violent and radiant. Her back arched as a scream tore from her lips, not hers, not entirely. Ancient howls echoed through her ribcage, ghosts of a time when gods still walked among wolves. The air around them fractured. The shadows broke open like rotten fruit. Malric roared, his alpha aura slamming against the walls of the altar. He bore down on her, arms caging her trembling body, his own body ablaze with a protective, possessive energy that defied the divine. "If you lose control," he said, voice shaking, "then lose it with me. I'll never leave. Not when you're like this. Especially not now." Tears streamed from her eyes. Her fingers curled around his shirt like talons. "I was supposed to die a long time ago," she sobbed. "Before I met you. Before I knew what it meant to be loved. And now you know." He kissed her, desperate, anchoring, fierce. So, let that be your curse. Their bond surged. A light flared between them, silver and crimson, searing the altar stones. Inside her mind, the old god screamed. No. But Lysaria didn't listen anymore. Her soul cracked open, not to the ancient power, but to the man who held her through it all. They collapsed together, not from pain but from weight of memory, of love, of the unbearable beauty of surviving each other. Later, in the privacy of the royal chambers, what had once been her prison and was now her only refuge, Malric held her through the tremors. Her skin was no longer fully human. The shimmer under her flesh moved like liquid metal. Her heartbeat no longer synced with the world. But it still synced with his. She lay in his arms, staring at her open palm. It's starting, she whispered. I can feel the last thread slipping. There will come a day I don't remember my name. Or yours. Malric kissed the top of her head. Then I'll teach you again. I'll whisper it every night. Every morning. Until you know it again. She turned, eyes wide and wet. And if I forget how to love you? He smiled through the heartbreak. Then I'll love you enough for the both of us. A pause. And if I become the monster? Then I'll be the one who tames it, he said softly, brushing her hair behind her ear. Even if it kills me. She curled into him. If one day I wake up and don't recognize you, will you still hold me? Malric didn't hesitate. Even if you grow fangs and tear the sky apart, he whispered, I will hold you until my last breath. Outside, the moon fractured behind clouds. Inside, a girl once cursed to carry the weight of gods clung to the only boy who had ever dared to love her more than fate. Chapter 30, When the Moon Wept. The sky above the valley was not dark nor fully lit. It was the strange kind of dusk that came only once in a lifetime, when the sun, bold in its descent, hesitated at the horizon and the moon, waning from blood back into silver, stood watchful above it. Twin lights bled into one another, painting the Wolf Valley in a dream of gold and frost. The wolves, once torn by centuries of feuds and curses, now stood as one. Malric stood still at the ridge, a dark figure against the sun's dying gleam. His arm was curled around Lysaria's waist, steadying her though she no longer needed the touch to remain upright. She was something more now, her footsteps no longer left deep indentations in soil, her breath no longer misted in the chill. She radiated a quiet stillness, as if the world whispered around her rather than through her. But she leaned into him anyway. In the wind, her white gown clung to her like a second skin, silver threads shimmering where moonlight touched them. Her eyes, once green, now mirrored the color of polished opal, holding both light and shadow, clarity and secrets. Where her hair had once glinted like silver, now threads of crimson streaked through like rivers of blood frozen in silk. And still, he held her as if she were breakable. I can feel it, she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the wind. It's gone. The curse, it's truly gone. He turned his face into her hair, pressing a kiss to her temple. Yes. His voice was hoarse. It broke the moment you chose to stay. She closed her eyes, remembering the pain, the power rising in her like a tidal wave, the ancient voice of the wolf god screaming in her veins, the way her body had burned with light and memory. And how he had reached for her in the storm, arms shaking, voice raw, saying again and again that he would not leave. That he would be damned alongside her before letting her be alone in the dark. Now there was peace. And yet, we should go to him, she said. He waited long enough. Malric didn't need to ask whom she meant. They walked in silence, the wolves parting around them like shadows. Some dipped their heads, some simply stared, as if still not entirely convinced she wasn't some myth that had stepped out of moonlight to save them. But none stopped them. None questioned her right to walk the sacred path, to step where once even elders had knelt. The grave was simple. Carved into the rock wall behind the fortress, beneath the old blackened oak tree that still bore frost-scorched bark, was a single slab of stone. No golden plaque, no title. Just a name. Everic. Lysaria knelt first. She didn't speak. Malric stood for a long time. Then he stepped forward, crouched, and laid a hand flat on the stone. His thumb trembled. "You were never just a guard," he said quietly. "And I was never kind enough to tell you." Lysaria lowered her gaze. "You kept me whole when I didn't know I was breaking. You held secrets you should have screamed to the world. And when it came time to choose between me and the truth, you chose both. You chose better than I did." He exhaled, then placed something small and wrapped in cloth upon the grave. Lysaria blinked, recognizing the crest of House Hailwind, Everic's old signet, once believed lost in war. "You kept your vow," Malric said. "So I make mine. You protected me all your life. I will protect her all of mine." Lysaria reached for his hand and laced her fingers with his. The wind brushed past them, slow and warm, like a final breath exhaled in peace. That night, the moon wept. The red hue that had plagued it for centuries, the blood-tied omen, the cursed mark of the ancient wolves, drained like ink from silk, washing the skies in soft argent. From the terrace of Blackrock Keep, Lysaria stood barefoot in her white robe, staring at the stars slowly returning to their rightful places. Below, the wolves had gathered in the valley. Dozens. Hundreds. A sea of fur and eyes and voices. Some shifted to human form and held torches aloft. Others remained in their primal skins, howling low and mournful. She turned at the sound of footsteps. Malric stood at the threshold, hair wet from the ritual bath, a ceremonial blade strapped to his belt. He wore no crown, only the simple black and silver tunic of his house, the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing the faint lines of old scars and the new pale imprint of her mark on his forearm. "You came," she said, though she had never doubted. He walked to her, not as a prince or a warrior or an alpha, but as a man. Her man. "I have nowhere else I belong." She touched the center of his chest. "And if I change?" "You already have. I mean truly change. If the god wolf buried in my bones rises again. If I forget names. If I forget you." He caught her hand, placed it over his heart. "Then I will remind you every night. With my voice, my hands, my love. Even if you howl and claw and bare your teeth. Even if you no longer say my name. I'll find you. I'll bring you back." Tears filled her eyes. "You are too good." "I'm not," he said. "But I'm yours." A soft cry broke from her lips as she reached for him, pulling him into a kiss, fierce, aching, reverent. The world narrowed to the shape of his mouth, the warmth of his palm against her cheek, the steady rhythm of his chest under her fingers. Somewhere below, the howling reached a crescendo. The moon spilled silver down like a blessing. They exchanged vows without a crown, without a priest, without blood. Only truth. Only breath. Only the kind of love that survived endings. Later, as dawn stretched fingers of gold across the mountain peaks, Lysaria sat wrapped in Malric's arms, their backs pressed to the stone railing of the terrace. The valley glimmered below, and the air was still, save for the soft snoring of wolves curled against one another like siblings. Lysaria smiled faintly, head tilted to the sky. "Did you know," she whispered, "that in the old tongue, they called it moon weeping when light and darkness finally kiss?" Malric pressed his lips to her temple. "Fitting." Her voice dropped. "Maybe that's what we are. The light and the dark. The curse and the choice." He looked at her. "And if we are?" She turned her head, eyes shimmering. "Then let the moon weep forever." Far below, as if summoned by her words, the wolves let out one final, united howl. It echoed through the valley, over mountain and forest, through shadow and memory, until even the stars seemed to pause in their course. And the north, long broken and bloodied, shimmered silver beneath the tears of the moon.